What if your memories aren't real? What if the memories you cherish most, the ones that define your identity and shape how you see the world, weren't real? Imagine for a moment that the things you remember so clearly, the birthday parties, the holidays, the faces of the loved ones, weren't exactly how you thought they were. What if your mind had altered them in ways you didn't even realize? What if the experiences you've built your life around were distorted or even entirely fabricated by your brain? This might sound like the premise of a science fiction movie, but it's actually a very real possibility. Memories, despite feeling like accurate records of the past, are far from perfect. They're not like photos or videos that capture things exactly as they were. Instead, memories are more like stories we tell ourselves, stories that our brains piece together from fragments of information. Each time we recall a memory, we're not accessing a fixed, unchanging image of the past. We're reconstructing it, and in this process, our brains might add or leave out details and sometimes even change things entirely. For example, think about the last time you vividly remembered a specific childhood event, like a family vacation. You might recall how it felt, the things that happened, and even the conversations you had. But how accurate are those memories? Over the years, our brains naturally tend to fill in gaps in our recollections with information from other experiences or even things we've heard others say. This means that a memory, as clear as it may seem, could be a mix of real events and things your mind has added over time. What makes this even more fascinating and a little unsettling is the idea of false memories. False memories are recollections of events that seem perfectly real, but they never actually happened. For example, you might remember an incident in vivid detail, like a disagreement with a friend, only to later discover that the event never took place at all, or that it happened very differently from how you remember it. It's as if your brain has created a memory out of thin air and you're left questioning what's real and what's not. False memories aren't always caused by deliberate intention or deception. Sometimes they happen because of how our brains process and store information. Our memories aren't like video recordings. They don't store every detail of what we experience. Instead, our brain filters and sorts the information, deciding what's important to remember and what can be discarded. As a result, some details get forgotten and others get exaggerated or altered over time. False memories can also be influenced by external factors. For instance, if someone tells you a detailed story about a childhood event that supposedly involved you, your brain might start to remember that event in the way they described it, even if it never actually happened. In this case, your mind doesn't recognize that the memory has been influenced by someone else's version of events. It feels real to you because your brain integrates this new information into your own recollections. One of the most fascinating things about false memories is how real they can feel. You might even remember the emotions you felt at the time, like happiness, fear, or excitement, and those feelings can make the memory seem undeniable. The brain's ability to create these memories can be so powerful that at times you might not be able to distinguish between a real event and something your mind made up. The idea that our memories might not be entirely trustworthy can be unsettling, especially when you realize just how much we rely on them. Our memories shape who we are, influencing our identity and how we navigate the world. We base decisions on our memories, draw meaning from them, and use them as guides for the future. If our memories aren't entirely accurate, it raises important questions about how we understand ourselves and the world around us. This is where it gets tricky. If your memories are sometimes distorted or even false, it can be difficult to know where the truth lies. Your sense of self, built on your recollections of past events, might suddenly feel less solid. The people in your life, the experiences you've had, and the emotions you felt, everything starts to seem less certain. And this uncertainty can lead to confusion and even distress. If you find out that some of your most treasured memories aren't entirely real, It can feel like you've lost a piece of your identity, or like you've been living a lie. Moreover, when memories conflict, when two people recall the same event in completely different ways, this can lead to misunderstandings and arguments. Both people might be convinced their memory is correct, but in reality, both might be remembering things incorrectly. This can be especially problematic in situations where people are relying on memories to make important decisions, like in legal cases or relationships. False memories have even been known to play a role in false accusations, where someone might believe they've experienced something that never actually happened. So, why do our memories change so much? To understand that, we have to look at how memory works in the brain. Memories aren't stored in one specific place in the brain like files in a computer. Instead, they're spread out across different areas. When you experience something, your brain encodes information like sights, sounds, and feelings about that experience. But because the brain is always processing so much information, it doesn't store every detail perfectly. Instead, it organizes and filters the information based on what seems most important or relevant at the time. The brain also doesn't record information in a way that preserves every little detail. It's more like a jigsaw puzzle that gets put together using pieces of past experiences and existing knowledge. When you try to recall something, your brain pulls together the available pieces and fills in the gaps. This means that some parts of the memory might not be as accurate as others. Over time, these small distortions can build up, turning an initially accurate memory into something that doesn't quite match reality anymore. The power of suggestion also plays a role in how memories can change. Research has shown that simply hearing someone describe an event in a certain way can alter your own recollection of that event. This is known as the misinformation effect, where the introduction of incorrect information can distort your memory. For example, if someone tells you about an accident you were involved in and describes it in vivid detail, you might start to remember the event as they described it, even if the details they provided aren't true. It's also important to note that false memories aren't always dramatic or harmful. Sometimes they're just small, harmless errors that don't really change the course of our lives. But other times, they can be more significant. They can affect relationships, cause emotional distress, or even lead to false beliefs about ourselves and the world. Understanding that our memories aren't always perfect doesn't mean we should dismiss them entirely. Our memories still shape our lives in meaningful ways, even if they're sometimes flawed. Recognizing that memories can change or be inaccurate can help us approach our recollections with more openness. It doesn't mean we have to question every memory, but it does encourage us to be a bit more cautious when we rely on them. It might even help us have more compassion for ourselves and others when memories conflict or when we realize that our past might not be as clear-cut as we once thought. So, what if your memories aren't real? It's a question that challenges everything we think we know about our past, but it also opens up new ways of thinking about who we are. We are not just the sum of our memories. We are the sum of how we experience the world and how we interpret it. Our memories may not always be accurate, but they still help define us. The truth of who we are isn't just in the facts of our past, but in how we grow and change with the passage of time. Even if our memories aren't perfect, they are still a part of what makes us, us. What if you've already died, and this is the echo? What if you've already died, and this is the echo? It's a deeply unsettling thought, one that challenges our understanding of life and reality. We live our lives assuming that everything we experience, the people we meet, the places we go, the choices we make, are part of a continuous linear journey. But what if that journey ended long ago, and what you're experiencing now is just a ripple, a shadow, an afterimage of a life that has already passed? What if everything you believe to be true, the world around you, the time you live in, and even the self you identify with, was just an echo of something that's already over? The concept of living after death, or existing in a state of perpetual echo, can be unsettling. Yet, it also invites deep reflection on what it means to be alive, to exist, and to experience reality. It's not a concept that can be easily explained or understood, but it challenges our perceptions in ways that make us reconsider the boundaries between life, death, and consciousness. Is it possible that death, as we understand it, is not the end of our existence, but rather a shift into another form of being? One way to approach this idea is to think of life as a story, a narrative that we tell ourselves. When we experience something, our brain processes it, stores it in memory, and we live as though we're experiencing everything in real time. But memories, dreams, and even moments of intense reflection can sometimes make us feel as though we're reliving events, as though we're in a place that's not entirely rooted in the present. It's as if we're suspended between two states of being, one that's connected to the living world and another that's rooted in a past that has already been left behind. The idea of an echo suggests something that reverberates, that lingers even after the source is gone. Imagine if your life, your thoughts, your emotions were simply echoes of something that no longer exists, fading slowly, like the sound of a bell that rings long after it has stopped being struck. What if the conversations you have, the places you visit, and even the people you encounter are all reflections of an existence that's already past, echoing in the spaces between life and death? This line of thinking brings up existential questions about the nature of time and existence. What if death isn't a finite moment, but instead a transition into a different kind of experience? Perhaps what we perceive as the passage of time is only an illusion, and after we die, we continue to experience reality, but in a way that is disconnected from the physical world. In this scenario, the echo could represent a version of reality that still exists for us, even after death, but it's not experienced in the same way we would understand it while alive. What does it mean for someone to be dead, but still present in this echo? If death is the end of our physical existence, then how can we continue to experience life in some form, even if only as an echo? Are we ghosts of our former selves, trapped in a liminal space between the living and the dead, unable to move on? Or are we simply caught in a loop, experiencing a kind of afterlife, where the events of our past replay themselves over and over again, with no real progression, but also no final resolution? This idea also touches on the concept of the mind and consciousness. If we are already dead, then what is it that makes us aware of our existence in this echo? Is it our consciousness continuing to function after our physical bodies have ceased? Or are we in a state of suspended animation, unable to fully process the reality of our death, stuck in a dreamlike state, where time and memory no longer flow in the way we understand them? In the realm of science fiction and philosophy, the idea of the afterlife as an echo of life has been explored in various ways. Some believe that after death, we enter a form of existence where the mind continues to experience reality, but in a fragmented or distorted way. It's like being in a dream, or perhaps even a simulation, where everything feels real, but there's something off about it. There might be a sense of familiarity, but a deep knowledge that something is not quite as it should be. In this scenario, life itself becomes a kind of illusion. Our perceptions, our memories, and our sense of self might all be part of a constructed reality that persists even after death. It raises the question of whether death is truly an end, or if it's simply the beginning of a new, unfamiliar experience. If everything we experience after death is just an echo, then are we ever truly gone? Or do we exist in some form, still experiencing the world we once inhabited, even after the body has stopped functioning? What if you've already died and this is the echo? The thought is both haunting and liberating. It suggests that there might be more to our existence than we realize, that the boundaries between life and death are not as clear-cut as we often imagine. It invites us to question the nature of our reality, to ponder whether there's something beyond the physical world, and to wonder if the essence of who we are can transcend time and space, lingering in an echo that persists long after we are gone. Ultimately, the idea of the echo challenges our understanding of life, death, and the self. It forces us to consider that perhaps we are not simply the sum of our physical existence, but something more, something that extends beyond the body and the tangible world. It opens up the possibility that our consciousness, our memories, and our experiences may continue in some form even after death, reverberating through time in ways we can't yet comprehend. And in that uncertainty, there's a kind of beauty, a reminder that life and death may be more mysterious and interconnected than we can ever truly know. What if everyone else is pretending just like you? What if everyone else is pretending just like you? It's a strange thought, one that challenges how we see the world and the people in it. In many ways, we all put on some kind of act in our daily lives. Whether it's in social situations, at work, or even at home, we often hide parts of ourselves or present a version of ourselves that we think others expect to see. But what if this is true for everyone? What if the person sitting next to you, the friend you confide in, the colleague you talk to, what if they're all just playing a role, pretending in some way just like you? At first, this idea might sound unsettling. After all, if everyone is pretending, how can we trust anyone? How can we know what's real if everyone is hiding behind a facade? But if you take a step back and think about it, the idea starts to feel less terrifying and more relatable. Because in many ways, we're all pretending in some capacity, aren't we? We play roles in different aspects of our lives, adapting to the expectations of others, and sometimes even to our own expectations of who we should be. And maybe, just maybe, everyone else is doing the same thing. Think about how you act when you're in a group of people you don't know well. You might be more reserved, or you might act in a way that feels more comfortable, more acceptable to those around you. It's not that you're being dishonest, it's just that you're presenting a version of yourself that fits the situation. You might adjust your tone of voice, the topics you talk about, or even the way you move and express yourself. It's a form of pretending, but it's also a form of adapting. After all, we all adjust who we are, depending on where we are and who we're with. But what if everyone else is doing this too? What if, just like you, they are all carefully curating the version of themselves that they want to present to the world? Maybe they feel just as uncertain, just as unsure of how they're supposed to act, just as worried about how they're being perceived. If that's the case, then maybe everyone else is, in their own way, pretending too, just as you are. What if, instead of seeing this as a negative thing, we could view it as part of what makes us human? In many ways, pretending is a survival mechanism. We put on masks or play roles because we want to fit in, because we want to be accepted, because we're trying to navigate complex social dynamics. At times, it's easier to pretend to be someone we're not than to show the vulnerability of being truly ourselves. In a world full of expectations and pressures, it can feel safer to hide behind a persona. But it's important to recognize that this pretending doesn't necessarily mean we're being fake or dishonest. Sometimes it's about protecting ourselves. Sometimes it's about feeling like we need to act a certain way to be successful, to be loved, or to be understood. We might pretend to be confident when we're actually feeling insecure. We might pretend to know what we're doing when we're actually uncertain. We might pretend to be happy when we're struggling inside, These small acts of pretending are a way of navigating life's challenges and complexities. So what if everyone else is pretending, just like you? What if they're all wearing masks, just like you are? It might help to realize that it's not so much about being fake, but about trying to manage the many roles we have to play in life. Perhaps the real question is not whether everyone else is pretending, but why we feel the need to pretend in the first place. What is it about being truly ourselves that feels so difficult or uncomfortable? What would happen if we stopped pretending? What if we could let go of our facades and show up as we really are, without fear of judgment or rejection? In truth, the idea that everyone is pretending can be both liberating and intimidating. On one hand, it means that you're not alone in your fears and insecurities. Everyone is just as uncertain as you are, even if they don't show it. On the other hand, it can be overwhelming to think that we're all constantly performing in some way, trying to meet expectations, trying to conform, trying to be something we're not. But here's the thing. Pretending doesn't necessarily have to be a negative thing. It's a way we adapt, a way we navigate the world. It doesn't mean we're being dishonest. It means we're trying to survive and thrive in a complex, ever-changing world. We all wear masks in different situations, and that's okay. The challenge is finding ways to be authentic, even within those roles, even within those masks. Because ultimately, the goal isn't to eliminate pretending altogether. It's to find a balance between who we truly are and who we need to be in different circumstances. And if everyone else is pretending, just like you, maybe that means that deep down, everyone is just trying to figure things out. We're all doing the best we can, trying to show up in ways that make sense to us and to others. So instead of seeing this pretending as something to be ashamed of, maybe we can see it as part of the human condition. After all, if everyone is pretending, then maybe there's no need to be so hard on ourselves. We're all just figuring out how to exist, how to connect, and how to navigate this wild, unpredictable journey called life. In the end, if everyone is pretending, maybe it's okay to embrace the fact that we're all in the same boat. We don't have to have it all figured out. We don't have to be perfect. And maybe, just maybe, if we can accept the fact that everyone else is pretending too, we might find a little more peace in knowing that we're not as alone in our struggles as we think. We might also find the courage to take off the mask every now and then, to be a little more real with ourselves and others, and to acknowledge that pretending is just another part of the human experience. What if your purpose was never yours to choose? What if your purpose was never yours to choose? This question can feel heavy, like a stone that sits in your chest, making it hard to breathe. For many of us, purpose is one of the most defining aspects of our lives. We spend our days searching for meaning, asking ourselves what we're here for, and how we can make our lives matter. But what if the very idea of purpose, the thing we've been chasing, was never meant to be something we picked for ourselves? What if it was something already decided, something that's been set in motion long before we ever thought to ask the question? This idea can be deeply unsettling. The idea that your purpose might not be something you choose sounds a lot like surrender, as though your life is not your own to direct. It raises the question, if we don't choose our purpose, then who does? Is there some greater force, some cosmic plan that guides us? Or are we simply following a script we didn't write? From an early age, we're taught that finding our purpose is something we must do, that we are supposed to search for it like a treasure we're meant to uncover. We're told to follow our passions, pursue our dreams, and make a difference. And yet, what if this search for purpose is not something that we can control? What if, instead of choosing our path, we are simply walking along a path that was already laid out for us, and all we're doing is trying to make sense of it as we go along? At first glance, this might sound like a surrender to fate. It might make you feel like you're powerless, like everything is beyond your control. But think about it for a moment. What if your purpose wasn't a burden to bear, but an opportunity to discover something greater than yourself. If your purpose was never yours to choose, it could be because you're part of something much bigger, something that doesn't rely on your limited understanding of what life is supposed to be. Consider the idea of fate or destiny. Many cultures and philosophies around the world have embraced the idea that there is a greater plan for us, one that unfolds whether we realize it or not. In these traditions, our individual purpose is seen not as something we choose, but as something that is revealed to us over time. We don't pick the path we walk, but we can find meaning in each step, learning to trust that every moment is leading us to where we need to be. In this sense, purpose isn't something we must create, but something we discover as we experience life, through the challenges, joys, and sorrows that come our way. This idea can be a relief for some. It takes the pressure off the constant search for meaning and instead invites us to simply experience life. If your purpose was never yours to choose, then you don't have to worry about getting it wrong or making a mistake. Your purpose is unfolding naturally, and it's not about picking the right career or achieving the right goals. It's about finding meaning in the journey, no matter where it leads. You might not know exactly where you're going, but that doesn't mean you're not on the right path. The path is already there, and all you have to do is walk it. On the other hand, the idea that your purpose isn't yours to choose can be frightening for those of us who thrive on control. We want to believe that we are the architects of our own lives, that we can shape our future by making the right choices and following our passions. The thought that our purpose might already be decided can feel like a loss of agency, like we're not truly free to be ourselves. What if the path we're on is not the one we would have chosen? What if we're meant to do something we don't want to do, something that doesn't align with our desires or aspirations? It's easy to feel lost or trapped when you believe that your purpose isn't in your hands. The idea of an external force deciding your path can make you feel as though you have no say in your life, as though you're just following along, swept away by something bigger than you. But maybe it's not about control at all. Maybe it's about trust. What if, instead of trying to control your purpose, you learn to trust the process, to trust that your life is unfolding in the way it's supposed to? Even though we like to think of ourselves as the masters of our fate, we're often influenced by things beyond our control. Our circumstances, the people in our lives, our environments, these all shape us in ways that we may not even fully understand. Our desires, dreams, and fears are often products of things we didn't choose, things that were shaped by our upbringing, our culture, and the world around us. Perhaps, instead of focusing on what we think our purpose should be, we can begin to see how our experiences are guiding us, how the twists and turns of our lives are leading us towards something meaningful, even if we don't fully understand it. Another important part of this idea is the concept of connection. If your purpose was never yours to choose, then it might be because your life is intertwined with the lives of others in ways you can't yet see. We are all part of a greater web, connected by our shared experiences, our struggles, and our triumphs. If your purpose is not yours to choose, then perhaps it's because your role is to contribute to this larger network, to play a part in something that's beyond your individual desires. We don't always get to choose our roles in life, but that doesn't mean those roles are meaningless. This idea can also be comforting when you consider that maybe, just maybe, your purpose is to be exactly where you are, to be exactly who you are right now. You don't have to strive to be someone else or achieve something you think you should be achieving. Maybe your purpose is to live authentically, to experience the highs and lows of life with acceptance, and to trust that everything is unfolding as it's meant to. Instead of chasing an elusive dream, you can focus on the present moment, embracing the life you're living and trusting that your purpose will become clearer as you move forward. Of course, some people might struggle with the idea of having no control over their purpose. They might feel that life should be about choosing their path, about actively deciding what they want to do with their time. And this is where the idea of choosing can still play a role. Just because your purpose wasn't something you consciously decided doesn't mean you can't shape your journey. You can still choose how to respond to life's challenges, how to act in moments of uncertainty, and how to contribute to the world around you. Your choices are still yours to make, and it's in those choices that you find meaning. The idea that your purpose was never yours to choose is ultimately a question of perspective. It's about letting go of the need for control and learning to trust that everything happens for a reason. Whether you believe in fate, destiny, or just the flow of life, this idea encourages you to find peace in the uncertainty and to know that your life has meaning, even if it's not always clear to you. It invites you to stop looking so hard for your purpose and to instead live with openness, knowing that the answers will come as you move forward. In the end, perhaps the most important lesson is that purpose isn't something we create or choose. It's something we discover as we live, as we experience, and as we grow. It may not always look like what we expect, but it's always there, unfolding naturally, guiding us along the way. Our purpose may never be ours to choose, but it's always ours to live. What if your happiest moments never actually happened? What if your happiest moments never actually happened? It's a thought that can stir up discomfort, even panic, because so much of who we are is shaped by the memories of the times we felt pure joy, love, or contentment. When we think back to those moments that defined happiness for us, whether it was a spontaneous trip with friends, a perfect family gathering, or a moment of achievement, the emotion tied to those memories often feels as real as anything else in our lives. But what if those moments, those cherished memories, didn't actually happen the way we remember them? What if they were altered, embellished, or even completely fabricated by our minds? The idea that our happiest moments might not be real challenges the very core of who we are and how we relate to the world. If the memories we hold closest to our hearts are not entirely true, what does that say about our past? Are we living in a reality built on falsehoods, or are our memories just part of a larger story, one where our minds try to make sense of experiences in the most comforting way possible? To understand this better, it helps to explore the nature of memory itself. Memories are not perfect records of the past. They are more like a collection of impressions, emotions, and fragments that our brains piece together over time. When you recall an event, your mind doesn't retrieve a flawless, detailed snapshot of what happened. Instead, it reconstructs the memory, filling in gaps, interpreting emotions, and sometimes even changing details to fit the narrative you've created in your mind. This process means that even the most vivid memories can be unreliable. Take, for example, a memory from your childhood, a moment when you felt truly happy. Perhaps you remember a birthday party where everything seemed perfect. The cake was delicious, everyone was laughing, and you felt surrounded by love. But as time passes, your mind might add extra details that weren't there, or alter parts of the scene to make it feel even more magical than it really was. Maybe you've heard people talk about that day, and their stories get blended into your own recollection, making the event feel more grandiose than it truly was. Over time, your mind molds the memory into something that feels real and meaningful, even if it isn't entirely accurate. This idea of memory distortion isn't just a philosophical concept. It's backed by psychological research. Studies have shown that our memories can be influenced by many factors, such as suggestion, emotional states, and the passage of time. Sometimes people can even be led to believe they experienced something that never happened at all. False memories, those moments that never occurred, are not as uncommon as we might think. They can be formed through subtle suggestions or simply through the brain's natural tendency to fill in gaps in our understanding of the past. When we consider the possibility that our happiest moments might not have actually happened, it can feel like a betrayal. If those joyful memories are distorted or even entirely fabricated, then what do we have left? What does it mean for our sense of self and the life we've built around those moments? Our happiest memories are often a source of comfort and pride. They help us navigate difficult times, reminding us of the love, joy, and beauty that we've experienced. If those moments were never real, does it mean that our happiness was never real either? But before this realization leads to despair, it's important to consider that even if our happiest memories aren't entirely accurate, the emotions we feel when we recall them are still very real. In other words, even if the details of an event are altered or exaggerated, the joy we feel in remembering it can still be genuine. The experience of happiness doesn't necessarily depend on the objective truth of the memory. The feelings that come with it, love, warmth, connection, are valid, even if the specifics are hazy. In fact, the fact that our brains are capable of turning past experiences into sources of deep happiness suggests that we don't need an exact replica of reality to feel joy. We may not always remember events as they truly happened, but our minds have a remarkable ability to take fragments of those experiences and turn them into something meaningful. It's as if the emotional essence of the event, the joy, the love, the connection, becomes more important than the factual details. The emotions tied to those moments are real, and they continue to shape us regardless of whether the moments themselves are completely accurate. Perhaps this is part of what makes us human, the ability to find meaning in our memories, even when they're not perfectly clear. We're not just seeking the truth of the past. We're seeking the feelings and connections that made those moments special to us. And sometimes, those feelings are enough. They remind us that happiness isn't just about a series of perfect events, but about how we experience life and how we choose to interpret those experiences. But what happens when we start to question the validity of our happiest moments? What if, over time, we begin to wonder if we've been living in a dream, clinging to memories that were never really ours to begin with? It can be an unsettling thought, but it might also be an opportunity for growth. If our happiest moments were never as perfect as we remember them, then maybe we've been placing too much value on the past. Perhaps the true key to happiness lies in the present moment, in finding joy in the now, rather than in an idealized version of what once was. It's possible that the more we focus on the past, the more we let it dictate our happiness. We might compare our current lives to those perfect moments we remember and feel that we'll never reach that level of joy again. But what if the point of happiness isn't about recreating the past, but about experiencing new moments, new connections, and new joys that build on what we've already learned? If our happiest memories didn't actually happen the way we remember, maybe it's a reminder that life is always evolving, and the best moments are the ones that haven't yet arrived. And perhaps in the end, this idea of memories and happiness is a reminder that life isn't about holding on to a perfect version of the past, but about finding beauty and joy in the present and future. It's about realizing that the moments we cherish are not about their factual accuracy, but about the emotions they evoke and the meaning we give them. Whether or not our happiest moments happened exactly as we remember them, they still shape who we are, and they still guide us toward a future where new moments of joy can be found. What if identity is just a convenient illusion? What if identity is just a convenient illusion? This thought can feel like a rug being pulled out from beneath your feet, a sense of disorientation creeping in as you question everything you thought you knew about yourself. Our identity is something we cling to, and it defines us, shapes how we interact with others, and gives us a sense of continuity throughout our lives. But what if the idea of a stable, consistent self, a core identity that persists through time, is nothing more than a useful fiction we've created to help us navigate the world? At its core, identity is about how we see ourselves and how others see us. It's the labels we attach to ourselves, our name, our job, our gender, our background, our values, and the roles we play in life. We think of our identity as something solid, something that defines who we are at our core. Yet, this notion of a fixed, unchanging self is increasingly being challenged by philosophers, psychologists, and even neuroscientists. What if, instead of being a permanent truth about who we are, identity is more like a story we tell ourselves, a narrative we create to give our lives structure and meaning? One way to think about identity is as a collection of stories, pieces of memory and experience that we stitch together over time. When we look back on our lives, we often see a clear progression of who we were at different stages, from childhood to adulthood. But is that progression really as linear and continuous as it seems? How much of it is influenced by the need to make sense of who we are, even if the person we were yesterday might feel like a completely different person from who we are today? If you think about it, the you that existed a decade ago is no longer the same you that exists today. Yet, the idea of continuity persists. From a psychological perspective, the way we form our identity is a highly fluid process. It's influenced by everything we encounter: our relationships, our environment, our changing circumstances, and even our internal mood. This suggests that identity isn't something static, but something that evolves, often without us realizing it. We are constantly reshaped by our experiences, by the choices we make, and even by the ways we choose to view ourselves. If identity were truly solid and unchanging, why would we feel like different people at different times in our lives? And why would our values, interests, and priorities shift so drastically as we grow older? But even if we acknowledge that identity is malleable and influenced by many factors, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's an illusion. It might just be a convenient one, a useful tool for navigating a world that can be overwhelming and chaotic. Identity gives us a sense of stability in a world that is constantly changing. Without it, we might feel lost, adrift, or uncertain. It provides a framework that helps us make sense of our past and our present, allowing us to create meaning out of the otherwise random events and experiences we go through. In this sense, identity is a practical, even essential construct, a way to organize the chaos of life into something we can understand and control. This idea of identity as a convenient illusion can be explored through the lens of the brain and consciousness. Neuroscience tells us that our sense of self is not located in one specific area of the brain, but is the result of complex interactions between various regions. There isn't a self sitting at the center of our consciousness. Instead, our self-awareness arises from the integration of different sensory experiences and memories. The brain takes all the data it gathers, how we feel, what we think, the events we experience, and creates a coherent narrative. This narrative is what we identify as me. But if our brains are constantly integrating new experiences and information, what happens to the me that existed before? Is that me still the same person, or has it evolved into something different without us even noticing? In fact, the very idea of identity seems to contradict the nature of reality itself. Everything around us is in a constant state of flux. Nothing is truly fixed. Our bodies change over time. Cells die and regenerate. Our hair grays and our faces wrinkle. The world around us changes too. Relationships evolve, circumstances shift, and societies transform. And yet we hold on to this idea of a stable identity, as if there is something unchanging at the core of us. What if this insistence on a fixed identity is simply a human need for order and control in an inherently unpredictable and impermanent world? Even the language we use to describe ourselves, I am this, I am that, suggests that we see our identity as something concrete. But when you look closely, the I is not a fixed entity. It's more like a fluid process, a shifting point of awareness that moves with time and context. It's a collection of labels we've chosen for ourselves, and these labels often change. One day we might identify as an artist, and the next as a parent or a student or a worker. These identities are not permanent. They are simply roles we occupy depending on the situation. And if we change our role, we change our sense of self in the process. The idea that identity is an illusion also ties into the broader philosophical concept of the self. In many spiritual and philosophical traditions, the concept of a fixed, separate self is seen as an illusion. Buddhism, for instance, teaches that the sense of a permanent, unchanging self is a source of suffering. According to this view, the more we cling to the idea of a permanent identity, the more we experience frustration and anxiety when that identity is challenged or disrupted. If we could let go of this attachment to identity, we might find greater peace and freedom. Our identity is not who we truly are. According to these traditions, it's just a temporary construction, a way to navigate the world while we are in it. So, if identity is a convenient illusion, what does that mean for how we live our lives? If we stop seeing ourselves as a fixed, unchanging person, we might become more open to growth and change. We might start to see ourselves as a work in progress, a fluid and evolving being who can shift and adapt as life unfolds. This can be liberating. We wouldn't be confined by the past versions of ourselves or limited by labels that no longer fit. Instead, we could embrace the idea that we are constantly becoming, always changing, and that this is not something to fear, but something to celebrate. If we let go of the idea of a permanent self, we might also become more compassionate toward others. Just as we are in a constant state of change, so are the people around us. When we stop defining others by a single identity, we open ourselves to seeing them as dynamic, multifaceted beings. We can appreciate them not for who they are supposed to be, but for who they are right now. In the end, the idea that identity is just a convenient illusion doesn't have to be a cause for concern. It can be a freeing realization, an invitation to step away from the constraints of fixed identities and embrace the fluidity of life. Identity might be a helpful tool, a story we tell ourselves to make sense of our experiences, but it's not the whole of who we are. We are not bound by labels or roles. Instead, we are a constant unfolding, a series of moments and experiences that flow together to create the person we are today. And that person? They are ever changing, ever becoming, just like the world around them. What if your thoughts don't belong to you? What if your thoughts don't belong to you? This is a concept that might initially feel disorienting, even unsettling. After all, when we think, we usually assume that the thoughts we have are our own, our creations, our reflections, and our interpretations of the world around us. We pride ourselves on our ability to think independently, to analyze, to reflect, and to make decisions based on our own internal dialogues. But what if those thoughts are not actually ours? What if they are influenced, shaped, or even planted by forces outside of our control? At first, the idea that our thoughts don't belong to us can feel like a violation of our personal autonomy, like our very minds are being invaded. But when you start to explore it, you realize that this concept isn't as far-fetched as it seems. In fact, there are many ways in which our thoughts are influenced by factors beyond our conscious control. From our upbringing, to the media we consume, to the culture we live in, the thoughts we have are often shaped by things we're not even aware of. Think about the messages you receive from society about who you should be, what you should look like, or what you should value. These messages are everywhere, on social media, in advertisements, in the movies we watch, and even in our conversations with friends and family. Many of these messages are absorbed by our minds without us consciously choosing to take them in. They become part of our thought processes, influencing how we see ourselves and the world. In a way, these thoughts don't entirely belong to us. They are shaped by the external world, by the expectations and norms that are ingrained in us from a very young age. Our parents, teachers, and peers all play a role in forming the foundation of our thoughts. The way we think about success, relationships, failure, and happiness is often influenced by what we've been taught, whether directly or indirectly. Growing up, we are constantly bombarded with external influences that guide our thinking, often without us even realizing it. We learn to value certain things because we are told that they are important. We think about ourselves in certain ways because we are taught to. In a sense, many of our thoughts are not entirely original. They are reflections of what others have told us to believe or value. Then there's the role of the media. Think about how often the news, advertisements, and even social media influence the way we think about the world. The messages we receive from these sources shape our opinions, fears, and desires. When we see images of beauty, success, or happiness on TV or Instagram, we may start to compare ourselves to these ideals, even if we know on some level that they are unrealistic or unattainable. The thoughts we have about ourselves, our bodies, our careers, and our lives are often shaped by these external sources, making us feel like we're chasing someone else's version of happiness or success. It doesn't stop there. The thoughts we have can also be influenced by unconscious biases and societal conditioning. From the moment we are born, we are exposed to gender norms, racial stereotypes, and social expectations. These influences shape the way we think about others and ourselves. We may not even realize that some of our thoughts, whether they're about other people or our own abilities, are influenced by deep-seated cultural beliefs that we never questioned. One of the more profound aspects of this idea is how thoughts can arise from nowhere, almost like they are not our own. Have you ever had a sudden thought or idea that seems to appear out of the blue, something you didn't consciously choose to think about, but that seems to have its own momentum? For example, you might be going about your day, and then suddenly an old memory pops up, or a random worry or fear emerges. Where do these thoughts come from? Are they truly yours? Or are they simply fragments of past experiences, ideas, or external influences coming to the surface of your mind? There is also the matter of mental health. People with conditions like anxiety or depression can experience thoughts that seem intrusive and uncontrollable. In these cases, thoughts might arise that feel completely foreign, as though they don't belong to the person experiencing them. In fact, mental health conditions often involve a loss of control over thoughts, where the mind is flooded with negative, uninvited ideas. These are not thoughts that come from a place of free will. They are often seen as intrusions, uninvited and unwanted. So in these moments, the idea that thoughts don't truly belong to the person experiencing them can be more apparent. In another sense, the idea that thoughts don't belong to us can be seen in the way we often struggle with our thoughts. We are constantly told to control our thoughts, to think positive, or to push negative thoughts away. But why is it so hard to control our thoughts if they are truly ours? If we had full control over them, wouldn't we be able to manage them more easily? The fact that thoughts often come and go with little warning, and that we sometimes feel powerless to stop them, suggests that they are not always as firmly in our control as we might think. In fact, we can often feel like passive observers of our own minds, as though thoughts are just appearing on their own, regardless of our will. This brings us to the idea of external forces shaping our thoughts. What if, on a more philosophical level, Our thoughts are not just influenced by the external world, but by a deeper collective consciousness. Some spiritual traditions and philosophies suggest that our minds are not isolated, but connected to something larger, whether it be a universal consciousness or an interconnected web of human experience. In this view, our thoughts might not only be shaped by our individual experiences, but by the collective energy of humanity itself. The thoughts we experience might be echoes of shared experiences, common hopes, fears, and desires that transcend individual boundaries. If we entertain this idea, it opens up the possibility that our thoughts are not solely ours. They are part of a larger interconnected system. In this sense, we could see our thoughts as both personal and collective, shaped by the intersection of our individual experiences and the broader human condition. It's a humbling thought, one that suggests that we are not as separate or as autonomous as we like to believe. Our thoughts might not belong entirely to us, but to the larger fabric of life and existence. So, what does it mean if our thoughts don't belong to us? Does it take away our agency, or does it give us a deeper sense of connection? It could be both. On one hand, recognizing that our thoughts are influenced by forces beyond our control can be empowering. It helps us understand that we are not alone in our experiences, that our struggles, our fears, and our desires are shared by others, and that we are part of a larger human story. On the other hand, it might make us question the extent of our free will. If our thoughts are shaped by external factors, to what degree are we truly in control of our minds? Ultimately, the idea that thoughts don't belong to us invites us to step back and reflect on the nature of consciousness and self-awareness. It challenges us to consider where our thoughts come from, who shapes them, and whether we are as separate from the world around us as we might think. And in that reflection, we might come to see that while we may not control every thought, we do have the ability to choose how we respond to them. We might not always have control over what pops into our minds, but we can choose what we do with those thoughts. And in that choice, we reclaim our agency. What if no one will ever truly know you? What if no one will ever truly know you? This is a thought that can be both deeply unsettling and strangely liberating. We all yearn for connection, for someone to understand us at our core, to see us as we truly are, not just the image we present, but the real vulnerable self beneath it all. But what if that level of understanding is impossible? What if, despite our best efforts, no one can ever fully grasp the depths of who we are, our internal struggles, dreams, and the essence of our being? It's a frightening thought, isn't it? The idea that we might go through our entire lives surrounded by people who care for us, but never truly be understood by anyone. It raises the question of what it means to be known. When we think of being known, we often imagine someone who sees all of us, our flaws, our dreams, our secret fears, and loves us all the same. But what if that perfect understanding is beyond human reach? What if there are parts of ourselves that we can never fully communicate, no matter how close we become to another person? We are, after all, complex beings. Our thoughts, emotions, and experiences are shaped by a lifetime of unique circumstances. Our internal world is vast, filled with layers of experiences, memories, and sensations that are difficult, if not impossible, to put into words. Even when we try to explain ourselves to others, we're limited by language, by the boundaries of how much we can articulate. There are feelings we can't quite describe, thoughts that don't fully make sense, and desires that feel too strange or too deep to express. In these moments, we're left with a feeling of isolation, as if no one can ever truly access the depth of who we are. And then, there's the reality that even when people know us well, they only see us through their own lens. Every relationship is colored by the experiences and perceptions of both people involved. Even the people closest to us can only understand us from their own point of view, shaped by their own history and personality. They can try to empathize with our struggles, and they might even feel as though they truly understand us, but their understanding is always filtered through their own experiences. This means that even the people we love most might never fully grasp every facet of who we are. It's not that people don't try. In friendships and romantic relationships, we often strive for intimacy, to bridge the gap between our internal selves and the people we care about. We share our thoughts, our feelings, our experiences, hoping that in doing so, we will be truly seen. But even in the best relationships, there are parts of ourselves that we can never fully reveal. It's not always because we're withholding, but because some aspects of our identity are simply too complex or too fragile to share. We might fear judgment, rejection, or even misunderstanding. And so we keep certain things to ourselves, even if we long for someone to know them. This doesn't mean that relationships aren't meaningful. On the contrary, the fact that we can connect with others, even if we can never be fully understood, is what makes those relationships so precious. The beauty of human connection lies in the effort we make to understand one another, even knowing that we will never fully succeed. It's the willingness to be vulnerable, to share parts of ourselves that are difficult to articulate, that creates real intimacy. And while no one can truly know us in our entirety, the effort to be understood is what brings us closer to others and makes us feel less alone. So, if no one will ever truly know you, does that mean we are doomed to eternal isolation? Not necessarily. The key to understanding this idea is to recognize that being truly known isn't the ultimate goal of connection. The real beauty of relationships comes from the shared experience of living life together, of supporting each other through joy and sorrow, of being present for each other in ways that words can't always capture. Even if someone doesn't fully understand you, they can still walk alongside you, offering empathy, support, and love in ways that make you feel valued and seen. Additionally, there's something deeply personal and freeing about the realization that no one can truly know you. It can create space for self-discovery and self-acceptance. If no one will ever fully understand every aspect of who we are, perhaps that means we don't need to have everything figured out for ourselves either. We don't need to be perfectly understood to be valuable or worthy of connection. We can embrace the mystery of our own selves, the parts that remain hidden even from our own understanding, and find peace in the fact that we are constantly evolving and unfolding. This idea also opens up the possibility of a deeper connection with ourselves. If we accept that others can never fully know us, we might feel the freedom to explore our own inner world without the pressure of needing to explain it to anyone else. We can start to appreciate the complexity and richness of our own experience, knowing that it doesn't need to be completely understood by others to be meaningful. In a sense, the inability of others to fully know us can be a reminder to prioritize self-awareness and self-compassion, to embrace the uniqueness of our own identity without relying on external validation. There is also the fact that, in some ways, we don't fully know ourselves either. We are constantly changing, growing, and discovering new things about ourselves. As we navigate life, we encounter new experiences, challenges, and revelations that shape who we are. There are parts of ourselves that we may not fully understand yet, and that's okay. This dynamic, ever-changing sense of self is part of what makes us human. Perhaps the true journey of life is not about being fully known by others, but about continuously discovering who we are, expanding our own understanding of ourselves, and finding meaning in that ongoing process. In this light, the idea that no one will ever truly know you can be seen as both a source of frustration and a source of freedom. It's frustrating because it reminds us of our inherent isolation, that there are parts of us that will always remain inaccessible to others. But it's freeing because it allows us to accept the complexity of who we are, without the need for others to completely understand us. We can find peace in the fact that our worth isn't tied to how well others understand us, and that our relationships are about the connection we share, not the completeness of that understanding. Ultimately, the thought that no one will ever truly know you is a reflection of the mystery of being human. We are all, in some ways, unknowable, not just to others, but to ourselves as well. But that doesn't make our lives any less meaningful. It's through the connections we make, the experiences we have, and the ways we express ourselves that we come to understand the depth of our own humanity. And in the end, perhaps it's not about being fully known, but about embracing the beautiful complexity of who we are, allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, and finding joy in the connections we make along the way. What if your meaning dies when you do? What if your meaning dies when you do? It's a question that hits at the very heart of what it means to live. The idea that our sense of purpose, our very reason for being, could vanish the moment we die, is one of those deep existential fears that most of us try to avoid confronting. The thought that everything we've done, every choice we've made, every relationship we've formed, could be meaningless once we're gone can be terrifying. It suggests that everything we work so hard for, the things we strive to achieve, the mark we want to leave on the world, might dissolve into nothingness when we take our final breath. When we talk about meaning in life, it's easy to fall into the assumption that meaning is something permanent, something that lasts beyond our lifetimes. We often think that by living a good life, by helping others, by pursuing our passions, we can create a lasting impact. We hope that our legacies, whether in the form of our work, our contributions, or our relationships, will continue after we're gone. But what if, when we die, the meaning we've attached to our lives simply evaporates, leaving no trace behind? This is a terrifying possibility for many of us because at its core, it challenges the very foundation of why we live. If meaning dies with us, what's the point of anything? If there's no lasting impact, no eternal recognition, no cosmic purpose, why do we bother striving to be better, to help others, to build something meaningful? It's a question that can easily lead to despair, especially for those who fear that their lives will have been for nothing. But what if, instead of focusing on the idea that meaning must endure beyond our death, we can find meaning in the very fact of living itself? What if meaning doesn't have to be something that lasts forever, but something that exists within the finite, the temporary, and the fleeting moments of our lives? Maybe the value of our lives isn't tied to what we leave behind, but to how we live them in the present. One way to approach this idea is by considering the impermanence of all things. We often think of meaning as something eternal, something that must endure forever to be valuable. But everything in life is temporary. Our lives, the people we love, the world we inhabit, they are all in a constant state of change. What if meaning, instead of being something that has to last forever, is simply about the impact we have in the moment? Even if our lives end and everything we've worked for fades into the past, the moments of joy, connection, and love we experience still have value. They still matter because they shape who we are in the here and now. Take relationships, for example. The love we give and receive may not last forever in the literal sense, but that doesn't make it any less real or valuable. The impact we have on others, the way we make them feel, the way we support them through their struggles, and the way we share in their joys. All of that has meaning in the context of our lives, even if it fades after we're gone. In a way, our meaning is tied not to permanence, but to the depth of our connections and the quality of our experiences. Moreover, the idea that our meaning could die with us might be rooted in the misconception that meaning is only valuable if it's preserved for all eternity. But life itself is an ongoing process of creation, evolution, and change. Every moment we live contributes to the larger story of humanity, and every act of kindness, every moment of learning, every step we take toward self-improvement is part of the meaning we create. Even if that meaning is only known to us and those around us, it's still meaningful. It still shapes our lives in profound ways, even if it's not written in the annals of history or passed down through generations. Another way to look at this is through the lens of personal fulfillment. Meaning doesn't have to come from external recognition or lasting fame. It can come from living in alignment with our values, pursuing what brings us joy, and cultivating inner peace. If we live a life that feels fulfilling and true to ourselves, that in itself can be enough. The idea that meaning dies when we do assumes that external validation is the only form of meaning that matters. But what if the most important source of meaning comes from within? Many people find meaning in their relationships with others. The love we share, the bonds we form, the impact we have on the people we care about. All of this creates a sense of purpose that doesn't rely on permanence. Even if we're not remembered forever, the positive effects we've had on the lives of others can ripple outwards, creating a lasting impact in ways we might never fully understand. The people we love and care for carry a piece of us with them, and through their actions and memories, our influence continues to be felt, even after we're gone. There's also a philosophical perspective that suggests the meaning of life doesn't come from any one single thing, but from the way we engage with life itself. The journey of living, being present, experiencing joy and pain, seeking growth, and exploring the world can be seen as meaningful in and of itself, even if it doesn't have a grand, lasting purpose. The moments we experience, the things we learn, and the people we connect with are all part of the meaning we create. It's not about leaving a legacy, but about embracing the fullness of life as it unfolds. In some ways, the fear that meaning dies with us is also a fear of the unknown. We can't predict what happens after we die, and so we grasp at the idea that our lives must have some kind of permanent impact to feel worthwhile. But what if the meaning of life isn't about what happens after we die? What if the meaning we seek is already here in the way we live, the way we love, the way we contribute to the world around us? Perhaps the very impermanence of life is what gives it meaning, making every moment, every connection, every act of kindness precious and worth cherishing. The thought that our meaning dies with us forces us to confront the idea of impermanence head-on. It challenges us to reconsider what makes life valuable and what gives our existence meaning. While it's easy to get caught up in the idea that our worth is measured by what we leave behind, the true meaning of life might not be in the lasting impact we make, but in the moments we experience and the connections we form. Even if our lives are finite, the love, joy, and growth we experience are real, and they are enough to make our lives meaningful. Meaning doesn't have to last forever. It's enough for it to exist right here, right now, in the fleeting beauty of life itself. What if nothing you do will ever matter? What if nothing you do will ever matter? This is one of the most crushing thoughts one could have, and it touches on a deep existential fear that most people try to avoid. The idea that no matter how hard we work, no matter how much we strive for success or happiness, in the end it all fades into insignificance, can be paralyzing. It calls into question the very purpose of our lives. Why do we bother doing anything if nothing will truly matter? It makes everything feel pointless, and that can lead to feelings of despair, confusion, or even a sense of hopelessness. The root of this fear comes from the desire to make a meaningful impact, to leave a mark on the world, and to feel that our lives have value. We all want to believe that the work we do, the relationships we form, and the goals we achieve will be worth something. We want to feel that our actions have lasting consequences, that they ripple out into the world and make a difference. But if nothing we do ever truly matters, what's the point of trying? Why continue to invest our energy in things that seem meaningless? However, before we give in to the despair that often accompanies this kind of thinking, it's helpful to step back and consider what we mean by matter. or importance. It's easy to fall into the trap of believing that for something to matter, it has to be monumental, permanent, or far-reaching. We often measure significance by external factors, recognition, fame, historical impact, or the ability to change the world on a grand scale. But what if we've been looking at meaning and significance in the wrong way? What if matters doesn't have to mean something as huge or lasting as we imagine? One way to look at this is to realize that meaning doesn't have to be measured by grand global outcomes. Our lives are made up of small moments, simple actions, fleeting experiences, and personal interactions that may not have a lasting world-changing impact, but still hold deep meaning for us and for the people around us. For example, a kind word to someone who is having a bad day might not go down in history, but it could make a world of difference to that person in that moment. A small act of kindness, a shared laugh, a moment of understanding, these things may not be immortalized, but they matter in the lives of those who experience them. In the same way, your actions, no matter how small, create ripples that extend beyond your immediate awareness. Maybe you never become famous, maybe your work is never remembered by future generations, but the impact you have on the people you encounter can carry forward in ways you might never know. The kindness you show, the love you give, the positive energy you bring, these things matter to the people you interact with, and their lives may be touched in ways that you can't see or measure. The effect you have on others in these quiet, everyday moments might be far more significant than any grand legacy you hope to leave. Moreover, the idea that nothing you do will ever matter often assumes a very narrow definition of importance. It's based on the notion that for something to matter, it must endure or have lasting effects. But what if the very act of living fully, of embracing life's fleeting nature, is meaningful in itself? If we allow ourselves to live with presence and mindfulness, finding joy in the everyday experience, we begin to see that meaning is not always about longevity or permanence. It's about the richness of the moments we're living right now. Another perspective on this is to consider the idea of self-worth. Often we tie our sense of significance to external accomplishments, our jobs, our achievements, our status. But what if our worth doesn't come from what we do, but from simply being who we are? We don't have to prove that we matter by doing something important in the eyes of the world. Our value as human beings is inherent simply because we exist. We matter because we're part of a greater whole, contributing to the fabric of life. And each interaction, no matter how small, adds something to the collective experience of being human. Let's also consider that the idea of nothing matters can be liberating. When we accept that the pressure to do something grand or lasting is not the ultimate measure of a meaningful life, we can begin to let go of the heavy burden of expectation. If nothing we do has to be monumental, we can give ourselves the freedom to live more authentically. We can focus on the things that bring us joy, the relationships that nourish us, and the experiences that make us feel alive. We can stop chasing significance in the traditional sense and start living in a way that feels meaningful to us in the here and now. The fear that nothing will ever matter can also open up a path to personal growth. It forces us to confront the idea of impermanence and the uncertainty of life. In doing so, we may begin to focus on what we can control, how we live, how we treat others, and how we experience the world. We may come to realize that the journey itself, the act of living, is what truly matters. It's not about having a grand impact on the world, but about finding meaning in the process of living each day, regardless of how long or short our time is. Lastly, what if we stop looking for meaning in the things we do and start looking for meaning in how we approach life? Life doesn't always have to be about accomplishments, success, or leaving a legacy. It's about finding joy in the little things, the warmth of a hug, the beauty of a sunset, the laughter of friends, the quiet moments of reflection. In these moments, we don't need to justify our existence by saying it will matter forever. It's enough that it matters now, in the present, in the lives of the people we touch, and in the way we experience the world around us. In the end, the fear that nothing we do will ever matter might not be about a lack of importance, but about how we define significance. If we measure meaning only by what endures beyond us, we may miss the value in the small, fleeting moments that make life rich. Instead of worrying about what will be remembered after we're gone, we can focus on what brings us joy in the present, how we connect with others, and how we choose to live. Because in the end, maybe it's not about how long something lasts, it's about how deeply we live it while we can. What if time isn't moving forward, just looping? What if time isn't moving forward, just looping? It's an idea that shakes the very foundation of how we experience the world. We live our lives under the assumption that time moves in a straight line, from the past through the present and into the future. This linear progression shapes everything we do, from setting goals to making plans to believing that each day brings us closer to some kind of end or resolution. But what if that isn't how time actually works? What if, instead of moving forward, time is endlessly looping, repeating itself over and over again? At first, the idea of time looping might sound like science fiction or a mind-bending concept from a philosophical text. But when you think about it more deeply, it raises some fascinating questions about how we understand our lives and our place in the universe. What if everything you experience, all the events in your life, the choices you make, the people you meet, are not unique, but part of a never-ending cycle, continuously replaying over and over again? Imagine waking up every morning thinking it's a new day, but then realizing it's the same day you've lived countless times before. The conversation you're about to have, the tasks you're going to tackle, the way you feel, it's all something you've already lived through. And when it's over, the cycle begins again, and you relive everything exactly as it happened before. In this world, there is no forward progression, no new experiences, no growth, just a loop that repeats itself for eternity. This concept can feel disturbing at first. If time is looping, then does anything we do matter? If we keep doing the same things, making the same mistakes, having the same conversations, does anything we experience have real significance? If nothing truly changes, then what's the point of living? These are the kinds of questions that can make us feel trapped, as though we're stuck in an infinite loop with no way out. There's a sense of helplessness that can come with this thought, the idea that no matter what we do, we'll always end up in the same place, doing the same things. But on the flip side, there's a certain freedom in this idea as well. If time is looping, then perhaps the pressure to achieve, to move forward, to reach some distant goal is unnecessary. If time doesn't progress in a linear way, we don't need to be constantly chasing the future. We can be free to live in the present, enjoying each moment for what it is, without worrying about what comes next. We might stop living as though we have to race against the clock, always trying to get somewhere, and instead focus on fully experiencing each repetition of life. In some ways, the concept of looping time is liberating. It suggests that there's no final destination where we'll suddenly arrive at meaning, success, or peace. There's no finality to worry about. The present moment is where everything happens again and again, and each cycle gives us another chance to experience life, to learn, to grow, or to simply enjoy the ride. If time loops, then we are given endless opportunities to appreciate the beauty of life, to make different choices, or to try again without the weight of finality hanging over us. Each loop is another opportunity for growth, reflection, and change, even if we don't remember the past loops. This idea can also change how we think about personal growth and change. In our typical understanding of time, we believe that we grow and evolve with each passing year. But if time is looping, then maybe growth isn't about moving forward in time, but about finding different ways to experience the same moments. Perhaps we're not supposed to change the world, but change the way we experience it. Each repetition of time could allow us to see things from new perspectives, to experience the same events in different ways, to find new meaning in what we thought was mundane. This could make each moment more precious, as we begin to realize that there's an infinite potential for discovery in the smallest things, even within the repetition. One interesting aspect of time looping is that it might suggest that everything we experience, the people we meet, the choices we make, is both predetermined and open-ended at the same time. In a loop, every moment is a combination of things that have already happened, but it's also a new opportunity to make different choices, to see things from a fresh angle. We may not be able to escape the cycle of time, but we can change how we interact with it, how we engage with it, and how we experience it. Each loop may be the same, but we aren't the same. We can learn, adapt, and grow, even if we're in a repeating cycle. The looping of time might also give us a different perspective on life's challenges. In a traditional linear view of time, obstacles and struggles are seen as setbacks we must overcome to get to the next stage in our lives. But if time is looping, then maybe these challenges are not something to escape from or get over, but part of the cyclical nature of life. Instead of resisting them, we could embrace them, recognizing that they are an inherent part of our journey. In a way, each loop gives us a chance to embrace the difficulty, learn from it, and find meaning in it, even if we can't escape it. However, there's also something unsettling about the idea of a time loop. It calls into question our perception of free will. If everything is repeating, does that mean our choices are predetermined and that we're merely going through the motions unaware of the cycle? Or do we still have agency, the ability to make choices that can alter our experience of the loop, even if the loop itself remains unbroken? It's a question that challenges our understanding of control and destiny, leaving us to wonder whether we're truly free to create our own path, or if we're stuck in a cycle that is beyond our power to change. The idea of time looping also has a connection to the way we experience time in our everyday lives. Think about how sometimes we feel like we're stuck in routines, or that certain events or feelings keep repeating themselves, like we're reliving the same days or experiences over and over again. Perhaps in those moments, we're catching glimpses of a larger truth about how time works. Maybe we're not stuck in time at all, but simply experiencing it in a way that we can't fully understand. The loops we experience in our minds and our lives could be a reflection of a much larger universal pattern, one that operates beyond our perception. Ultimately, the idea of time looping challenges our assumptions about life, growth, and meaning. It invites us to reconsider how we view the passage of time, the way we experience change, and what it means to live a meaningful life. If time is truly looping, then maybe the meaning of life isn't about reaching a final destination or achieving some ultimate goal. Maybe it's about how we experience each cycle, how we choose to engage with the moments as they come, and how we learn to find meaning in the repetition. After all, in a world where time loops, every moment, every choice, every connection, every experience has the potential to be unique, even as it repeats. What if free will is just a story we tell ourselves? What if free will is just a story we tell ourselves? This question taps into one of the most profound and unsettling philosophical dilemmas, whether we are truly in control of our actions or if we're simply following a script that we believe is our own. Most of us walk through life assuming we are making choices freely as independent agents, navigating a world full of possibilities. But what if that sense of freedom is merely an illusion, a comforting narrative we create to make sense of our experiences? At the heart of this idea lies a fundamental question. Do we truly have control over our decisions, or are they determined by forces beyond our awareness? We often feel like the decisions we make are our own, that we weigh our options and choose the one that aligns with our desires, values, and reasoning. But when we start to examine this idea more closely, it becomes clear that much of what we think of as free will is influenced by factors outside our conscious control. To start with, consider the impact of our biology. Our brains and bodies are governed by complex biological processes, neurotransmitters, hormones, genetic predispositions that shape our thoughts and behaviors. For example, a person's personality may be heavily influenced by genetics, or their ability to make rational decisions might be impaired by the chemical imbalances in their brain. If these factors influence how we think and act, how free are we really? Are we making choices based on our true desires, or are we simply reacting to biological impulses that we can't control? Then there's the influence of the environment. From the moment we're born, we are shaped by our surroundings, our families, cultures, education, and societal norms. These influences provide the framework within which we make decisions. The choices we think are ours are often deeply influenced by the values and expectations instilled in us by those around us. How much of what we choose is truly our own, and how much of it is shaped by the world we live in. For example, our careers, our relationships, even our preferences in music or food, are often guided by the cultural context we find ourselves in. We may think we're making decisions based on our individual preferences, but in reality, we're acting within a framework of cultural and social conditioning. Furthermore, the concept of free will becomes even more complicated when we factor in the unconscious mind. So much of our decision-making happens below the level of conscious awareness. Our brains are constantly processing information, making judgments, and guiding our actions without us ever being fully aware of it. Much of what we think of as conscious choice is actually the result of automatic mental processes. For example, have you ever made a decision and later realized that it was based on an impulse or an emotion you weren't fully conscious of? This happens all the time, suggesting that much of what we think of as our free will is actually driven by unconscious forces that we don't even realize are at play. Even the concept of time plays a role. We often think of ourselves as free agents, capable of making independent decisions at every moment. But our decisions are often shaped by the past. Our memories, past experiences, and history all influence the choices we make. When we think we're making a new choice, we might simply be reacting to a past experience or trying to avoid repeating a previous mistake. In this sense, our choices may be more about repeating patterns than about creating something entirely new. The idea that free will is an illusion can also be explored from the perspective of determinism. In the deterministic view, every event, including human thoughts and actions, is the result of preceding causes. If every action we take is the result of prior events, both internal and external, then we can question whether we are truly free to act however we choose. For example, if our upbringing, genetics, environment, and even the experiences we have in the moment all play a role in guiding our decisions, can we truly say we have free will? If we could somehow trace all the factors that led to our decision, would we find that it was predetermined from the beginning? One way to think about this is through the lens of a story or script. Imagine that your life is a script and you're playing a character. You might feel like you're the one deciding how the character behaves, but in reality, everything about the character's decisions is determined by the script that was written for them. The character might think they are choosing their actions freely, but those choices are all part of the story. In the same way, many philosophers argue that our lives may follow a script that we don't fully understand. The choices we make, while they may feel free, might be shaped by a multitude of influences, genetic, environmental, social, and unconscious, that we are not fully aware of. But what does this mean for our experience of life? If free will is just a story, does that mean we are powerless, or that our lives have no meaning? Not necessarily. Even if our choices are influenced by factors beyond our control, we still experience those choices as our own. We still live in the world as individuals, making decisions, experiencing emotions, and shaping our lives in ways that feel meaningful. The fact that we might not have complete control over every aspect of our lives doesn't necessarily take away from the richness of our experience. Our lives are still meaningful in the ways that we experience them, the connections we make, the goals we pursue, and the moments of joy we feel are real, even if they are influenced by forces beyond our control. There is also something freeing about accepting that free will might be an illusion. If we are not fully in control of our actions, we might be able to let go of the heavy burden of perfectionism and self-blame. If we stop holding ourselves to the impossible standard of being fully independent agents, we might find it easier to forgive ourselves for the mistakes we make and to embrace the unpredictability of life. If our actions are shaped by so many forces beyond our awareness, perhaps we can start to accept that we're doing the best we can in a world that is far more complex and interconnected than we realize. At the same time, acknowledging that free will might be an illusion doesn't mean we stop trying to live authentically or to make choices that align with our values. Even if our decisions are influenced by factors beyond our awareness, we can still strive to live with intention, to understand ourselves better, and to make choices that bring us closer to the life we want to create. Understanding that free will is limited doesn't mean giving up on making positive change. It means recognizing the complexity of our actions and embracing the ongoing journey of self-awareness and growth. In the end, the idea that free will is just a story we tell ourselves forces us to rethink the nature of choice, responsibility, and self-determination. It challenges the traditional notion that we are completely in control of our actions and invites us to see our lives as part of a much larger web of influences. Whether or not free will is real, we are still living, experiencing, and making choices in a world that is rich with meaning. And perhaps that's what matters most, the experience itself, with all its complexity and uncertainty. What if language is limiting your reality? What if language is limiting your reality? It's a question that feels almost paradoxical, because language is the tool we use to describe and make sense of the world around us. It's how we communicate, express thoughts, share emotions, and even think. We rely on language to shape our experiences and connect with others. Yet, what if this very tool we rely on is actually restricting how we see and understand reality? Language is, by its nature, an abstraction. It's a system of symbols, words, sounds, and written characters that represent ideas, objects, and experiences. But those words are just representations. They are not the thing itself. For instance, the word tree is not the tree. It's merely a label we use to describe a complex living organism. The word love is not love. It's a concept we use to communicate feelings and experiences that are, in many ways, indescribable. So, in trying to define our world with language, we are always limited by the words we have at our disposal. Think about how we experience the world on a sensory level. We see, hear, taste, touch, and smell things constantly, but language can only describe those experiences in approximate terms. A color, for example, is something we see, but how can we ever truly convey the exact experience of seeing that color to someone who hasn't seen it? We might call it red, but red is just a word. It doesn't fully capture the richness of what it feels like to experience that color. In this way, language can only represent our experiences. It can never fully encapsulate them. It's an imperfect tool for describing the full range of human perception. But the limitation of language goes even deeper. Language doesn't just describe what we perceive, it also shapes how we perceive the world. The way we think about reality is influenced by the words we have to describe it. This is known as linguistic relativity, or the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which suggests that the language we speak influences the way we think and experience the world. For example, in some languages, the way people think about time is vastly different from how we think about time in English. In English, time is often seen as a linear progression, past, present, and future. But in other cultures, time might be thought of as cyclical or more fluid. The structure of the language shapes how people within that culture perceive and relate to time. Similarly, the words we use to describe emotions can shape how we feel those emotions. If we have a word for a particular feeling, we might be more aware of it and more likely to experience it. But if we don't have a word for a feeling, it may be harder to recognize or fully process that feeling. This is why in some languages there are words for emotions that we don't have in English. For example, the German word Schadenfreude describes the feeling of pleasure derived from someone else's misfortune, but in English there's no one-word equivalent. By not having a specific word for this feeling, English speakers might be less conscious of it or less able to articulate it when it arises. In a similar way, language can limit our understanding of abstract concepts. Think about the word self. In many cultures, the concept of self is seen as a fixed individual identity. But in other languages and philosophies, the self is viewed more fluidly, as something that is interconnected with others, the environment, or even the universe. In cultures where the language reflects this interconnected view of the self, people might experience themselves in a more relational way, as part of a larger web of existence. If we are limited to thinking of ourselves as separate individuals, we may miss out on a deeper, more holistic understanding of who we are and how we relate to the world around us. The limitations of language are not just about how we describe things, but also about how we structure our thoughts. The words we use to describe reality shape our mental models of the world. For example, consider how our language categorizes things. We divide the world into discrete categories: people, objects, actions, events. But what if those categories are not as clear-cut as our language suggests? What if the lines between categories are more fluid than we realize? Language might force us into thinking about the world in terms of neat distinctions. This is a person. That is a tree. Here is a chair. But in reality, the world is full of gray areas and overlaps that language can't always capture. Our mental models are shaped by the words we use, and by using those words, we might limit our ability to see the nuances and complexities of the world around us. Another way language limits our reality is by defining what is possible and impossible. The way we talk about the future, for example, shapes what we think is possible. If we constantly use words like "I can't," "it's too difficult," or "it will never happen," we are reinforcing a limited view of what is possible. Our words shape our beliefs and expectations, and those beliefs and expectations in turn shape our actions. In this way, language can trap us in a narrow view of what is achievable, keeping us from exploring new possibilities or pushing beyond perceived limits. Moreover, language can create boundaries between people, between cultures, and between ideas. Different languages carry with them different ways of thinking, different values, and different worldviews. When we communicate in one language, we might unintentionally filter out the richness of other cultures' perspectives. Certain concepts or ways of thinking that are common in one language may be hard to express in another, leading to misunderstandings or a limited worldview. In this sense, language can create barriers that keep us from fully understanding others and from seeing the world from different perspectives. So if language is limiting our reality, what can we do about it? One approach is to become more aware of how language shapes our thinking and our perceptions. By recognizing the ways in which language can constrain our ideas and experiences, we can start to break free from those limitations. For example, we can try to expand our vocabulary or explore languages that express concepts we might not have words for in our own language. By learning how others think about time, self, or emotions, we can start to broaden our own understanding and develop a richer, more nuanced view of the world. Another way to loosen the grip of language on our reality is by exploring nonverbal forms of communication. Art, music, dance, and other forms of expression can convey meaning that words alone cannot. These forms of communication can help us experience the world in ways that transcend the limits of language, allowing us to connect with others and ourselves in a deeper, more profound way. By embracing these alternative forms of expression, we can tap into a more expansive, nonlinear understanding of reality. Ultimately, the idea that language limits our reality doesn't mean that language is inherently bad or useless. Language is, after all, a powerful tool for communication, connection, and understanding. But it's important to recognize its limitations and to understand that there are many ways to experience and understand the world that go beyond words. By expanding our awareness of these limitations, we can begin to see the world in a more expansive way, one that is not confined by the boundaries of language, but open to the richness of human experience. What if every version of you already exists? What if every version of you already exists? This thought challenges our understanding of time, self, and reality itself. It suggests that instead of the linear progression of life where we constantly evolve into the person we are becoming, every version of ourselves, past, present, and future, already exists simultaneously. From the version of you as a child to the person you'll become in the future, every possible path your life could take, every decision you could make, and every possibility that could unfold is already there, somewhere, waiting. At first, this idea can seem overwhelming or even impossible. How could every version of ourselves already exist? Our lives feel so firmly rooted in the present, with each moment unfolding in real time. But if we take a step back and think about the concept of time and the vastness of existence, this idea begins to open up new possibilities. What if time is not a straight line, but something more fluid, something where all possibilities coexist, where every possible version of ourselves exists in parallel? In physics, the concept of the multiverse proposes that there could be many universes, each with its own version of reality. If this is true, then it's not too far-fetched to think that in one of these universes, you are living a life very different from the one you are experiencing now. The choices you made in this life could have played out differently in another version of reality. Perhaps in one universe, you took a different job, made different friends, or chose a different path entirely. In another, you might have made different decisions that led to an entirely different life, full of different experiences. The idea that every version of you already exists raises some deep questions about identity and self. If all versions of you are already present, does that mean the person you are right now is just one of many iterations of yourself? And if this is true, what does that say about the future versions of you? Are they already you, waiting to unfold, or are they separate entities that live out their own lives in parallel to yours? The thought that all of our different selves are existing at once can blur the lines between past, present, and future, challenging our perception of what it means to be one person. This concept also invites us to think about the nature of choice and free will. If every version of ourselves already exists, do we truly have free will? Or are we merely stepping into the role that has already been laid out for us, shifting between the different versions of ourselves based on the choices we make? This brings into question whether we are creating our future or simply discovering a version of ourselves that has already been chosen by the universe. Some may find comfort in this idea, while others may feel a sense of powerlessness. If every version of us already exists, then it could suggest that our lives are already determined, and we have no real control over what happens to us. But that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. Just because every version of you exists doesn't mean you are unable to influence your path. In a way, knowing that all possibilities already exist means you have access to infinite potential, giving you the power to choose which version of yourself you wish to embody. You might feel like you are walking a predetermined path, but in reality, every step you take could be opening a door to a new version of yourself, a new universe where different possibilities play out. This idea also sparks reflections on personal growth and transformation. If every version of you exists, then the process of self-improvement or personal change may not be about becoming a different person over time, but more about aligning with a version of yourself that already exists. Each time we evolve, we may simply be reconnecting with a part of ourselves that already exists in another version of reality. Instead of thinking of personal growth as a journey forward, we could see it as a journey of rediscovery, where we access different versions of ourselves and bring them into our current life. In terms of relationships, this concept also suggests that the people you meet and the connections you form could be part of a larger pattern that exists in all possible versions of your life. Perhaps you and the people around you have multiple versions of your relationship that exist in parallel universes, where different outcomes unfold based on the choices each of you makes. This raises the intriguing idea that every moment you share with someone could be a glimpse into one of many possible realities, where the course of your interactions has already been played out in various ways. On a deeper level, the idea that every version of you exists simultaneously can offer a profound sense of connection to the universe. It suggests that there is no single right way to live your life, no single version of yourself that is more valid or meaningful than another. All versions of you, your past mistakes, your present joys, your future possibilities, are part of a greater whole, a never-ending tapestry of existence. In this sense, you are not confined to one path, but are free to explore an infinite number of possibilities, each version of you carrying its own unique set of experiences and lessons. One powerful takeaway from the idea that every version of you already exists is the notion of self-acceptance. If all versions of yourself already exist, then perhaps there's no need to chase some idealized version of who you think you should be. All parts of you, your flaws, your strengths, your regrets, your victories, are part of the fabric of your existence. You are already every version of yourself, and the act of living is simply about moving through the different iterations of who you are, finding the one that resonates with you in the present moment. Moreover, if we allow ourselves to accept this idea, it can create a sense of peace. The pressure of needing to make the perfect choices can fade away because we realize that no matter what we do, there is already a version of us who has taken a different route, experienced different outcomes, and is thriving in a different version of reality. There is no one perfect version of yourself. There are many. This idea liberates us from the fear of getting things wrong or making the wrong decisions because, in the grand scheme of things, every possible path is valid, and every version of ourselves already exists as part of the infinite expanse of time and possibility. At the same time, the concept of every version of you existing simultaneously can encourage us to look at life with fresh eyes. Instead of viewing each decision as a permanent step toward one future version of yourself, you might begin to see life as a fluid, ever-changing landscape where many possibilities coexist. Every choice you make opens a door to a new version of yourself, a new reality, and in each of those realities, you are learning, growing, and becoming the person you were always meant to be. So what if every version of you already exists? It might just mean that the possibilities for who you can become are endless, and all you have to do is embrace the journey, knowing that every iteration of yourself is valid, valuable, and part of the infinite potential of who you are. What if your fears are more real than your memories? What if your fears are more real than your memories? It's a thought that might sound strange at first. After all, Memories are what define our past and shape our sense of self. They are the foundation of who we are, the experiences that we hold on to and reflect on throughout our lives. Fear, on the other hand, is often seen as an emotional response to something uncertain, a projection of the future, something we imagine or anticipate. So why would our fears, which are often linked to what might happen, be more real than what has happened in our lives? But when you think about it, fear has a way of hijacking our minds, taking over our present reality in a way that memories can't always do. Memories are often distant, tethered to the past, while fear can be incredibly immediate. It's not just an emotion we experience, it often feels like a force that pulls us into a state of heightened awareness, alerting us to something that might be dangerous, threatening, or unknown. In those moments of fear, our bodies respond, our thoughts race, and our attention narrows onto the source of the fear, often something that hasn't even happened yet. What makes fear feel more real than memories is how it pulls us into the present moment with such intensity. Fear has a biological and psychological impact on us that is immediate and visceral. When we experience fear, our body goes into a fight or flight response. Heart rates increase, muscles tense, and our mind becomes fixated on the potential danger. The adrenaline that courses through us amplifies the intensity of the moment, making it feel more tangible and real than any memory could. In that sense, fear is not just something we feel emotionally, it's something we physically experience in real time. Memories, on the other hand, are often filtered through the lens of time. They're recollections of past events that might be distorted or faded with age, and the further away from the event we are, the less immediate they feel. The emotional charge they once held may have softened, or we may have reinterpreted the memory as we've grown and changed. Our memories may not always feel as vivid or as pressing as the fear we feel right now. While memories can shape who we are, fear often defines how we react in the present moment. When faced with a fear, we are forced to confront it right here, right now, with our full attention and energy. Consider a scenario where you're worried about a future event, a job interview, a public speaking engagement, or an upcoming decision that might change your life. The fear of what might happen during that event can occupy your mind in ways that a memory of something that happened years ago may not. Even if the event has not happened yet, the fear you experience feels incredibly real and immediate. It can affect your behavior, influence your decisions, and even impact your physical well-being in ways that memories, which are more distant, don't. This brings us to the concept of how fear can distort our perception of reality. Often fear doesn't come from rational thought or facts. It comes from our mind imagining worst-case scenarios, from thinking about all the things that could go wrong. Our minds are experts at creating stories about the future, and when we're afraid, those stories are often amplified. These imagined fears can feel just as intense as real experiences, and sometimes even more intense because we're not anchored by the knowledge of how things turned out in the past. Fear is full of possibility, but not the good kind. It's full of negative possibilities, many of which never come to pass, yet it still holds a powerful grip on us. When we compare this to memories, we notice a key difference. Memories, while they can be vivid and emotionally charged, are anchored in the past. They have already happened, and the worst part is over. We know how it played out, and often our memory of it might be softened by time or reinterpreted based on our current perspective. Fear, however, is often based on something uncertain. We don't know how things will turn out, and that uncertainty makes it feel all the more real. The unknown, the possibility of something going wrong, holds a power that memories can't replicate. Fears are also often more primal and instinctual than memories. Our fears are designed to protect us. Fear triggers survival instincts that go back to our most basic biological needs: to stay safe, to avoid harm, and to protect ourselves from danger. Even in situations where we don't face physical danger, our mind still triggers those instincts in response to imagined threats. Memories, in contrast, aren't tied to that immediate biological response. A memory might evoke sadness, joy, or nostalgia, but it doesn't trigger the same fight-or-flight reaction that fear does. This also connects to how fear shapes our decisions in the present. We might avoid things that trigger fear because we believe they will lead to harm or disappointment, even if those fears are unfounded. Memories, on the other hand, are often something we reflect on and learn from, not something that directly drives our actions in real time. Fear can stop us from taking action, from making decisions, or from trying something new because we're too fixated on the potential negative outcome. Memories might teach us lessons, but fear actively shapes our current choices by influencing what we think is possible and what we should avoid. If our fears feel more real than our memories, it may be because fear taps into the most immediate and raw aspects of our psychology. It makes us feel alive and present, even though the threat may only exist in our minds. Memories, by contrast, are often diluted by time and perspective. They are tethered to past events, whereas fear pulls us into the now, heightening our senses and making everything feel more intense. The result is that fear feels more powerful, more compelling, and sometimes more real than the memories we carry with us. So how do we handle this? If our fears are more real than our memories, how do we deal with them? One step is to recognize that fear is often a product of our own mind. It's based on thoughts of what might happen, not on the reality of what is happening right now. When we understand this, we can start to differentiate between what is real and what our minds are creating. Recognizing that fear is a reaction to the unknown can help us gain a sense of control over it rather than letting it control us. Another way to deal with the disproportionate power of fear is through mindfulness and self-awareness. By being present in the moment, we can begin to separate the current moment from the imagined fears of the future. We can learn to focus on what we do know, the present moment, the actions we can take, and the steps we can control. When we live more fully in the present, we can often reduce the grip that fear has on us and put it into perspective. Ultimately, while fear might feel more real than our memories, we have the ability to navigate it. By recognizing that fear is often a mental construct, we can begin to reframe it, challenge it, and ultimately make peace with it. In doing so, we empower ourselves to live more fully, unencumbered by the weight of imagined futures, and able to experience life without letting our fears dictate what's possible. What if reality ends when you close your eyes? What if reality ends when you close your eyes? It's an unsettling thought, one that challenges the very foundation of how we understand our existence and our relationship with the world around us. Our daily lives are built on the assumption that reality continues, whether or not we are consciously aware of it. The world doesn't stop when we blink, we assume. People continue to move, time continues to pass, and things continue to exist regardless of our awareness. But what if this assumption is false? What if, when we close our eyes, whether to sleep, to rest, or to simply look away, reality itself ceases to exist until we open them again? This idea touches on something deeper about perception and existence. It suggests that our experience of reality is tied directly to our awareness of it. If we close our eyes and shut off our senses, does the world cease to be? In a very literal sense, when we close our eyes, we stop taking in sensory information. We no longer see, hear, or experience the world around us in the usual ways. If our perception is the only thing keeping reality intact, what happens when we aren't perceiving? The question also challenges how we think about time. Time, as we know it, is linked to our awareness and our perception of events unfolding. But what if time only exists in the moments we are consciously aware of it? When we're not looking, does time simply cease to move forward? Does the future cease to unfold until we open our eyes again? In a way, this brings up the idea of time as a subjective experience rather than an objective, absolute reality. For us, time passes because we are aware of it passing, but if our awareness were to vanish, could time stand still? Another way to explore this idea is through the lens of solipsism, a philosophical theory that suggests only the self is certain to exist, and that everything else, including other people and the external world, may be a creation of the mind. If reality ends when we close our eyes, could it be because the world around us is simply an extension of our own consciousness, and without our awareness, it doesn't exist in the way we perceive it? In this view, the world around us, our relationships, the people we interact with, the objects we encounter, could be seen as reflections of our own mind, and when we stop paying attention, they vanish. But even if we don't subscribe to solipsism, the question of whether reality ends when we close our eyes still prompts reflection on the limits of perception. How much of the world we experience is actually out there, and how much of it is constructed by our minds? Our brains interpret sensory data, create mental models of the world, and generate our perception of reality. Without our senses, there is no experience of the world, so, in a sense, when we close our eyes, reality as we know it might indeed disappear for us, even if it still exists objectively. The idea also raises questions about consciousness and existence. We generally assume that the world exists independently of our minds. The sun rises whether we see it or not. The trees grow whether we observe them or not. And the passage of time continues whether we're conscious of it or not. But what if our consciousness is more integral to the existence of reality than we realize? What if reality is not as objective and fixed as we think, but instead is something that unfolds in relationship with our awareness of it? In this case, closing our eyes could be seen as a form of disconnect, where our individual consciousness briefly steps out of the flow of reality, causing it to pause until we return to it. The more we think about it, the more we realize that closing our eyes is a metaphor for something deeper, the relationship between perception, consciousness, and reality. How much of what we consider real is based on what we are actively perceiving? When we close our eyes, we temporarily disconnect from the sensory world, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everything else stops. However, the experience of non-existence or pause that we feel when we close our eyes is real for us, as it alters our perception of reality. We can think of it like entering a dreamless sleep, where time ceases to feel linear and everything feels still. In those moments, we lose track of the world and reality seems to stop moving for us personally, even though it may continue on in its own right. What does this all mean for how we live our lives? If closing our eyes marks a moment when reality ends for us, it serves as a reminder of the fragility of our perception. It asks us to consider the role we play in creating the world we experience. When we wake up in the morning, we might experience reality anew. But how much of our experience of it is shaped by our minds, by our beliefs, and by our perceptions? If we view reality as something that only exists because we are perceiving it, then perhaps we have more power to shape our experience of it than we realize. Our sense of the world is filtered through the lens of our consciousness, and by changing that lens, by changing our mindset, our perspective, or our awareness, we might shift the reality we experience. This thought also brings up the potential for living more fully in the present moment. If closing our eyes is a metaphor for stepping out of the flow of the world, maybe it encourages us to be more conscious of the times we truly engage with the world around us. How often do we go through life with our eyes metaphorically closed, unaware, distracted, disconnected from the present moment? What if we chose to open our eyes to the world in a deeper way, recognizing how fragile and interconnected our perception of reality is? Finally, this idea encourages us to question the nature of existence itself. If reality ends when we close our eyes, it suggests that our perception of the world is not something passive. We are actively participating in the creation of reality every moment through our awareness, attention, and consciousness. Reality, in this sense, becomes a shared experience between us and the world around us. And just as we can choose to close our eyes, we can also choose to open them more fully to the richness of the world, allowing ourselves to experience life with deeper presence and awareness. In conclusion, the thought that reality ends when we close our eyes is both unsettling and enlightening. It challenges our assumptions about time, perception, and existence, encouraging us to think more deeply about the relationship between our consciousness and the world we experience. Whether or not this idea is literally true, it invites us to appreciate the fleeting nature of our awareness and the immense potential we have to shape our reality through how we choose to perceive and engage with it. What if you're just the dream of someone else? What if you're just the dream of someone else? This thought, though unsettling at first, challenges the very nature of our existence. It proposes a reality where everything we experience, our thoughts, our emotions, our actions, might not be entirely our own. Instead, they could be part of a dream, a creation of someone else's mind. This idea evokes questions about the nature of reality, consciousness, and identity. It calls into question the very essence of who we are and how we perceive the world around us. At first glance, this concept might sound like science fiction or a philosophical paradox, but it's rooted in ancient ideas and modern theories. Philosophers such as René Descartes, in his Meditations on Doubt and Reality, wondered how we could ever be sure of anything if our experiences could be the product of a deceiving force, or if we were part of a dreamlike state. In some spiritual traditions, particularly in Eastern philosophy like Hinduism and Buddhism, the idea of the world being an illusion, a dreamlike experience created by a higher consciousness, is a recurring theme. In these traditions, our sense of self and our perception of the world are considered temporary and illusory, like characters in someone else's dream. If you are just the dream of someone else, it would mean that your entire existence, the choices you make, the people you meet, the emotions you feel, could be part of a larger imagination. Every experience you have, every moment you live, could be the manifestation of someone else's thoughts and desires. The very world you see could be a creation, a scene playing out in someone else's mind, like a vivid dream where you have no control over your actions, but are simply playing a role in someone else's narrative. This thought brings up deep questions about the nature of consciousness. If our reality is just a dream, whose consciousness is it that we are experiencing? Is there a creator, a higher being, or a divine mind dreaming us into existence? And if so, what is the purpose of this dream? Is it just a passing fantasy, or does it have meaning, structure, and intention? In many ways, this line of thinking is not entirely new. Some philosophers and theologians have pondered whether what we experience as reality is just an illusion, a projection of a higher consciousness, much like the world we experience in a dream. If you are a character in someone else's dream, it could explain the feeling of being watched or observed that some people sometimes experience in moments of intense self-awareness. In dreams, we often feel as though we are part of a larger story, where the events unfold around us, seemingly independent of our control. The world, in this sense, might feel like a dream, where everything is fleeting and the only real thing is the dreamer's consciousness. This feeling of being part of something larger than ourselves might actually be a glimpse into a deeper, more interconnected reality, one where the boundaries between self and other dissolve. This idea also evokes the concept of free will and destiny. If you're just the dream of someone else, then how much agency do you really have? Are your actions, choices, and desires simply being played out in the dream of another mind? Or do you have the ability to change the course of the dream? In dreams, the characters rarely have any control over their actions. They are often driven by the will of the dreamer. If our lives are merely the manifestation of someone else's dream, do we have free will? Or are we simply following a predetermined path, fulfilling the desires and whims of the dreamer? On the other hand, what if this idea of being a dream isn't necessarily a negative one? If our lives are part of someone else's dream, then perhaps there's a sense of interconnectedness and purpose beyond our understanding. Just as characters in a dream might serve a greater narrative or fulfill a purpose within the dreamer's mind, we might also be part of a grander design, one that we can't fully comprehend. If we are simply the dream of another, perhaps we are playing a vital role in a much larger, more complex story, one that transcends our individual experiences. This concept also raises the idea of the fluidity of reality. Dreams are inherently malleable, capable of shifting at will. What happens in one moment may change entirely in the next. If we are just a dream, then perhaps the reality we experience is equally fluid. Our lives, our worlds, and even our very selves may not be as fixed as we perceive them to be. In this sense, being part of someone else's dream may open up the possibility of transformation and change, where anything is possible and everything is impermanent. If we exist only as part of a dream, then we are not bound by the limits of physical reality, and we may be able to shape our experience in ways we can't yet fully understand. The idea that we are simply the dream of someone else might also help explain the strange sense of connection many of us feel to the universe, to others, and even to the mysteries of existence. Many people report experiencing the moments where they feel deeply attuned to the world around them, where everything seems to align, as though they are part of something greater. If we are just part of a dream, perhaps this feeling is not just a coincidence. Perhaps it's a recognition that we are deeply embedded within a larger consciousness, playing a role in something far more expansive than we can see from our limited perspective. In addition, being part of someone else's dream might challenge our understanding of self and identity. If we are just a character in another's mind, who are we really? Are we simply a projection of that consciousness, or do we have an independent existence? The sense of self that we experience could be just an illusion, a fleeting sense of individuality created by the dreamer's mind. This can be a humbling realization, one that helps us let go of the need to cling to a rigid sense of identity and allows us to embrace the fluid, transient nature of our existence. Finally, if we accept the possibility that we are the dream of someone else, it may lead to a profound shift in how we approach life. Instead of seeing ourselves as isolated individual beings, we may come to recognize that we are part of a larger whole, intricately woven into the fabric of someone else's imagination. This could help us cultivate a sense of humility, gratitude, and interconnectedness. We might start to see the world not as a random collection of events, but as part of a purposeful, meaningful narrative unfolding within the mind of the dreamer. In the end, the idea that we are just the dream of someone else doesn't necessarily diminish the value of our lives or experiences. It invites us to see our existence in a new light, one that acknowledges the fluidity of reality, the mystery of consciousness, and the profound interconnectedness of all things. Whether or not we are the dream of someone else, our lives still matter, our experiences are still real to us, and the love, joy, and connection we share with others are as meaningful as any dream could ever be. What if love is just evolutionary manipulation? What if love is just evolutionary manipulation? This idea challenges one of the most fundamental human experiences, the feeling of love. For many, love is something pure, transcendent, and deeply meaningful. It's seen as the force that binds us to others, giving our lives richness, connection, and purpose. But what if love, instead of being a mystical or transcendent force, is actually a product of evolutionary biology, designed to manipulate us into behaviors that support survival and reproduction? At first, this thought can feel disillusioning, even unsettling. The idea that love might not be a deeply spiritual or emotional experience, but a biological mechanism designed to ensure the continuation of our species reduces something so powerful to mere survival instincts. It suggests that our feelings of love, whether romantic love, familial love, or even love for friends, might not be as selfless or genuine as we think. Instead, they could be seen as the result of evolution shaping our behavior to serve reproductive and survival needs. From an evolutionary perspective, the idea that love is a form of manipulation makes sense. Love plays a key role in bonding people together, particularly in the context of reproduction and child-rearing. In romantic relationships, love encourages pair bonding, creating the emotional attachment necessary for two people to stay together long enough to raise offspring. In the case of parent-child love, the intense attachment a parent feels for their child ensures they will care for and protect the child until they are old enough to fend for themselves. This attachment promotes the survival of the next generation. Similarly, the love we feel for others in our social circles, friends, extended family, and even members of our communities can be seen as an extension of this survival instinct. Social bonds have always been crucial for survival, particularly in early human societies, where cooperation was essential for obtaining food, providing protection, and sharing resources. Love for others, therefore, could be seen as a way of ensuring that we maintain strong social bonds, which in turn increases the chances of survival. So, if love is just evolutionary manipulation, what does that mean for us? Does it diminish the value of love or the way we experience it? To some, the idea that love could be a form of manipulation might seem cynical. It might feel as though the authenticity of love is stripped away when we acknowledge its evolutionary purpose. If love is just a tool of biology, then does it truly have any deeper meaning? Are we just biological machines operating on autopilot, driven by evolutionary forces that we can't control? However, while this might be a disheartening perspective for some, it can also open up a more nuanced understanding of love. Acknowledging that love serves evolutionary purposes doesn't necessarily undermine the emotions we feel or the connections we form. The fact that love has biological roots doesn't negate its emotional power or significance in our lives. Just because love is biologically driven doesn't mean it isn't real or meaningful in the moment. In fact, understanding that love is tied to evolution can help us appreciate the intricate ways in which our biology influences our emotions and behaviors. It highlights the ways in which we are interconnected with the natural world, and how much of what we experience as human beings is rooted in deep biological processes that have been honed over millions of years. Love, then, becomes a bridge between our biological instincts and our human experience. It's a way that our bodies and minds work together to ensure our survival, but it's also something that gives our lives meaning, connection, and purpose. We might be biologically driven to love, but that doesn't make the love we feel any less real or important. Moreover, the idea that love is evolutionary manipulation doesn't necessarily imply that love is just about reproduction. While it's true that love plays a role in helping us reproduce and raise children, love also promotes behaviors that go beyond reproduction, such as cooperation, empathy, and altruism. These behaviors have a wider social benefit, strengthening communities and creating bonds that are necessary for the well-being of society as a whole. Love, then, might be seen not just as a tool for individual survival, but as a force that helps us work together to ensure the survival of the group. It's also worth considering that love is a complex emotion that can't be entirely reduced to a simple biological function. While evolutionary psychology offers valuable insights into why we form attachments and experience love, it doesn't capture the full depth of love's complexity. Love can be experienced in countless ways, transcending its evolutionary function and taking on a variety of forms: romantic love, platonic love, familial love, and even love for art, ideas, or a higher power. These forms of love are not always about survival or reproduction, and they often go beyond biological imperatives. They can bring joy, fulfillment, and meaning to our lives, and they can inspire us to be our best selves, to connect with others on a deeper level, and to contribute to something greater than ourselves. Furthermore, even if love has evolved to serve certain survival and reproductive goals, that doesn't mean we don't have some agency in how we experience it. We might be biologically inclined to form attachments and to feel love. But how we choose to express that love, who we choose to love, and how we invest in relationships is influenced by a wide range of personal, cultural, and societal factors. While evolution may have shaped our capacity for love, we still have the ability to define what love means to us, to cultivate it in meaningful ways, and to shape our own relationships. Love, then, is not just a biological function. It is also a human experience shaped by our choices, values, and desires. The notion that love is evolutionary manipulation also raises important questions about the role of choice in relationships. If love is biologically driven, does that mean our choices in partners or relationships are predetermined by our evolutionary instincts? The answer is likely more complex. While our instincts may guide us in certain ways, humans are also capable of making conscious decisions about who we love, how we love, and why we love. We have the ability to choose to love, to nurture our relationships, and to create bonds that go beyond instinct. This adds a layer of depth and autonomy to love, allowing us to make decisions that align with our values and desires, even if those choices are influenced by our biology. In the end, the idea that love is evolutionary manipulation doesn't have to diminish the experience of love. It can deepen our understanding of it. By recognizing the biological roots of love, we can appreciate the complexity of human emotion and the ways in which our instincts are woven into our social and emotional lives. Love is both a powerful force shaped by evolution and a deeply personal, meaningful experience that brings richness and purpose to our existence. While it may have evolved to help us survive and reproduce, love also plays a vital role in shaping our happiness, our relationships, and our sense of connection to others. It's a reminder that even the most fundamental human experiences are shaped by both biology and choice, and that we are more than just the sum of our evolutionary instincts. What if death is the only truth? What if death is the only truth? This question is profound and unsettling, as it brings us face to face with the inevitability of our mortality and challenges many of the ways we find meaning in life. Throughout human history, we have sought comfort and meaning in the face of death, creating philosophies, religions, and narratives that promise something beyond our physical existence. The idea of an afterlife, reincarnation, or spiritual transcendence is part of the human effort to find hope and meaning in a reality that often feels ephemeral. But what if, in the end, death is the only undeniable truth we can rely on? What if there is no afterlife, no cosmic purpose, no continuation of consciousness beyond our physical bodies, only the cessation of life itself? At first, this realization can feel crushing. If death is the only truth, what does that say about our lives? What about the relationships we build, the achievements we strive for, or the love we give and receive? If all of it ends with death, what's the point of living at all? This is where the question of death being the only truth becomes existential. It forces us to confront the impermanence of everything, the relationships we cherish, the dreams we pursue, and the identities we create. Nothing lasts forever, and no matter how much we achieve, death will come for all of us eventually. In a world where everything is subject to decay and eventual end, does anything truly matter? The thought of death being the only truth can feel like a dark void. It strips away the comforts of religious promises, the illusions of immortality, and the hope that something larger than ourselves holds meaning for us. But in that void, there is also an invitation to look more deeply at life itself. If death is the only truth, then it becomes the lens through which we can examine the choices we make, the way we live, and what we value. Perhaps the realization that death is inevitable offers a kind of freedom, a freedom to live authentically. If we accept that death is the only certainty, we might be motivated to live more fully in the present moment, knowing that time is finite. This sense of urgency can push us to prioritize what truly matters, to focus on the relationships that bring us joy, the passions that make us feel alive, and the actions that reflect our values. If we embrace the reality of death, we may be able to let go of trivial distractions, societal expectations, and the endless pursuit of things that ultimately don't bring us meaning. When we fully acknowledge that death is inevitable, we might also be able to shed the fear that often comes with it. Fear of the unknown, fear of losing our loved ones, fear of the end itself. These are all natural responses to mortality. But if we accept that death is a part of life and the only certainty we face, we may start to see it differently. Instead of fearing death, we can shift our focus to making the most of the time we have, living in a way that honors the truth of our impermanence. In a sense, death can be seen as a kind of paradoxical gift. By accepting death as the only truth, we are free to live without the pressure of trying to avoid it or deny it. We can begin to appreciate life for its fleeting beauty, knowing that the very impermanence of our existence is what makes each moment precious. Just as a work of art is more meaningful because it is finite, so too is life. The impermanence of life and the certainty of death allows us to find value in every experience, every relationship, and every breath we take. This perspective on death also brings us to think about the meaning of life itself. If death is the only truth, then life must be seen as a brief, precious opportunity, a chance to experience, create, connect, and learn. It doesn't matter whether life lasts a few years or 100. The value of our existence is not in its duration, but in how we live it. We may not have control over when or how we die, but we have control over how we choose to live in the face of death. In many ways, this understanding of death as the only truth can help us rethink our attachment to the outcomes of our lives. We often spend so much of our energy chasing success, recognition, and material wealth, believing that these things will bring us lasting fulfillment. But in the grand scheme of things, none of this lasts forever. Our accomplishments, our possessions, and our status will eventually fade. If death is the only truth, then perhaps it's time to shift our focus away from accumulating things and toward creating meaning through connection, compassion, and experience. Moreover, the idea that death is the only truth might also encourage us to reflect on the interconnectedness of all life. If death comes for everyone, then we are all part of the same human experience, sharing this brief moment of existence. This realization can foster empathy, compassion, and a sense of solidarity with others, knowing that we all share this same inevitable fate. In a world where everyone is subject to death, perhaps the most meaningful thing we can do is to be kind to one another, to help each other make the most of the time we have, and to live in a way that honors the shared truth of our mortality. One of the most profound implications of seeing death as the only truth is the realization that life itself is precious precisely because it is fleeting. If we knew we would live forever, would we take life for granted? Would we continue to put off important moments or delay the pursuit of our dreams, knowing that time would never run out? The knowledge that our time is limited, that death will inevitably arrive, is what imparts urgency and beauty to life. It compels us to act, to love, to create, and to experience life fully, rather than letting it slip away in a haze of distractions. At the same time, accepting that death is the only truth also frees us from the need to seek eternal answers or explanations for our existence. We can let go of the fear that we need to find some higher, cosmic purpose in order for our lives to matter. Instead, we can focus on the truth of our lived experience and find meaning in the here and now. Whether or not there is an afterlife, whether or not there is a greater cosmic plan, what truly matters is the way we live our lives and how we choose to spend our time. In conclusion, while the thought that death is the only truth can initially feel unsettling, it ultimately provides us with a unique opportunity to live more consciously and meaningfully. By acknowledging the certainty of death, we are reminded of the preciousness of life and the importance of living with intention, gratitude, and connection. We may not know what lies beyond death, but we can make the most of the time we have by embracing the truth of our mortality, finding meaning in our experiences, and sharing our lives with others in ways that honor the fleeting beauty of existence. What if every action you take was already decided? What if every action you take was already decided? This thought challenges the very idea of free will, which is central to how we understand ourselves as autonomous individuals. For most of us, the belief that we make decisions freely based on our thoughts, desires, and reasoning is essential to how we live and navigate the world. But what if, in reality, every choice we make, every step we take, was already determined? What if all our actions, from the smallest decisions to the biggest moments of our lives, were set in motion before we even became aware of them? At first, this idea feels disempowering. It suggests that everything we do, everything we choose, is out of our control, that we are simply following a script that has already been written. The thought that our lives are determined by forces outside of our conscious awareness raises deep questions about responsibility, morality, and the very nature of our existence. If our actions were already decided, what does that mean for the concept of free will? Can we still be held accountable for our actions if they were never really our choices to begin with? This line of thinking often leads to discussions of determinism, the belief that every event or action is the result of preceding events, governed by the laws of nature or cause and effect. According to determinism, everything that happens is part of a chain of events that stretches back through time, and the future is just the inevitable result of those events. If determinism is true, then every choice you make was shaped by your past, your biology, your environment, and every influence you've ever encountered, down to the smallest detail. In this view, the idea of free will, where we make independent conscious choices, might just be an illusion. The more we explore this idea, the more questions arise. If every action is already decided, what role does consciousness play in our decision-making? Are we just bystanders in our own lives experiencing a reality that we have no control over? It feels as though it would rob us of the agency to shape our future, to strive toward goals, or to learn from our mistakes. But is this really the case? Can we still find meaning in our lives if every action has already been determined? One possible response to this unsettling realization is that even if every action is already decided, it doesn't necessarily take away the value of those actions or the experiences that come with them. Think about the way a story unfolds. We often read or watch stories with characters who face challenges, make decisions, and learn from their experiences. Even if the story is written in advance, we still engage with the characters, empathize with their struggles, and find meaning in their journey. Similarly, in our own lives, we might be following a predetermined path. But that doesn't mean the experiences we have along the way, our joy, our love, our pain, and our growth, are any less real or meaningful. Another way to think about this is to consider the idea of choice within the context of a deterministic world. While our actions may be influenced by past events, external circumstances, and internal drives, we still experience them as choices. The feeling of making a decision, of weighing options, and of taking action is deeply embedded in how we understand our experience. Even if those decisions are determined by prior causes, we still live through them as though they are choices. In a sense, the feeling of free will is an essential part of how we experience life, even if it isn't the ultimate force behind our actions. Moreover, even if everything we do is already decided, it doesn't mean that our actions are irrelevant or meaningless. If every action is the inevitable result of the forces that came before, then each decision is part of a larger interconnected web of cause and effect. The beauty of life could lie in the way that everything is interconnected, with each action contributing to the unfolding of an intricate universal narrative. This view might help us shift our perspective from focusing solely on our individual autonomy to recognizing our role in the larger story of life. This also ties into the idea of fate or destiny. What if our actions are part of a grand plan or purpose, one that is bigger than we can understand? In this view, even if everything is decided in advance, there could still be meaning in the journey because every action we take plays a part in fulfilling that larger purpose. It's not about the choices themselves being free, but about the experiences we have as we move along the path that has already been set. Another possibility is that the feeling of making choices, our sense of agency, is an integral part of the human experience, and it might be the very thing that gives us meaning, regardless of whether or not those choices are determined. The experience of having control over our actions, even if that control is an illusion, is still central to our perception of life. It's what allows us to engage with the world, to feel that our lives matter, and to experience growth and change. In a way, the illusion of free will might be just as important to our sense of self and meaning as actual freedom itself. The idea that every action is already decided might also offer a sense of peace, as it could relieve us of the burden of making the perfect choice at every turn. If we accept that our choices are part of a larger, predetermined plan, we might let go of the pressure to control everything and simply allow life to unfold. This acceptance could lead to a deeper sense of tranquility as we stop overthinking our decisions and trust that everything is happening as it should, even if we don't fully understand the reasons behind it. On the other hand, if we reject the idea of determinism and embrace the concept of free will, we could choose to live with the belief that we are the creators of our own reality. The idea of free will offers us empowerment, the opportunity to make choices that shape our lives and create the future we desire. While we may acknowledge the influence of external factors on our decisions, the belief in free will allows us to maintain the agency to choose how we respond to life's challenges and opportunities. The choice between determinism and free will might not be about finding an ultimate truth, but about the way we approach life. Whether we believe we are the authors of our own story or merely characters in someone else's, we are still actively participating in the unfolding narrative of our lives. In the end, the idea that every action is already decided forces us to confront the limits of our understanding of free will, responsibility, and existence. It challenges us to rethink our approach to choice, meaning, and purpose. Whether or not we believe our actions are determined, the fact remains that we experience life as if we are making choices and shaping our destiny. And that, in itself, is a meaningful and important part of being human. Even if the script is already written, the journey of living through it remains our own, and how we experience it is as real and valuable as any choice we make. What if your inner voice is lying to you? What if your inner voice is lying to you? The idea that the voice inside your head, the one that guides your decisions, helps you navigate your emotions and shapes your sense of self, could be unreliable or deceptive is a deeply unsettling thought. For many of us, this inner voice is one of our most trusted companions. It's the voice that reflects our thoughts, provides us with advice, and helps us make sense of the world. But what if, instead of being a reliable guide, this inner voice is lying to us? What if it distorts the truth, feeds us misinformation, and leads us astray? The inner voice, or self-talk, is a natural part of the human experience. It reflects our internal dialogue, the thoughts we have about ourselves and the world around us. But this inner voice isn't always objective. It's shaped by our past experiences, our emotions, our fears, and our beliefs. In some cases, it can be influenced by negative patterns of thinking, anxiety, or unresolved trauma. In these instances, the voice inside our heads might not always reflect the truth, but instead can magnify our insecurities, doubts, and fears, leading us to believe things about ourselves or our situation that aren't necessarily true. For example, someone with low self-esteem might hear an inner voice that tells them they're not good enough or that they don't deserve success or happiness. This voice might speak louder than any external encouragement, making them feel worthless or incapable, even though these feelings aren't grounded in reality. The inner voice might be lying, reinforcing negative beliefs that were formed long ago, but still hold power over the person's sense of self-worth. Similarly, anxiety can cause the inner voice to amplify fears and worries, convincing us that something terrible is about to happen, even when there's no real evidence to support it. This voice can distort our perception of danger, making us believe that we're in more peril than we truly are. It can cloud our judgment, creating a sense of doom or helplessness that doesn't reflect the actual situation. But why does the inner voice lie to us? One reason is that our minds are wired to protect us. Fear, anxiety, and doubt are natural responses to perceived threats, and the inner voice might exaggerate those responses to keep us safe from potential harm. However, in the modern world, where many of our fears are not as immediate or life-threatening as in our evolutionary past, this heightened sense of danger can lead to distorted thinking. Our inner voice, rather than guiding us toward growth and clarity, becomes a source of self-sabotage, creating unnecessary stress and limiting our potential. Another reason the inner voice can lie is because of the stories we've internalized throughout our lives. From an early age, we absorb messages from our parents, teachers, peers, and society that shape how we see ourselves. These messages, whether they are positive or negative, become part of our inner narrative. If, for example, we were repeatedly told we weren't good enough or that we would never succeed, our inner voice might continue to echo these messages long after we've left the source of those beliefs. Even though these messages are no longer true, they can become deeply ingrained in our subconscious, influencing the way we think and act. So if our inner voice is lying to us, how do we know what is true? The first step is to recognize that the voice in our heads is not always reliable. It's important to understand that thoughts are not facts. Just because we hear a thought doesn't mean it's true, and just because we feel something doesn't mean it reflects reality. Our emotions and thoughts are deeply influenced by our past experiences, fears, and beliefs, and they don't always provide an accurate reflection of the world around us. One way to challenge a deceptive inner voice is through mindfulness and self-awareness. By observing our thoughts without judgment, we can begin to recognize when our inner voice is being influenced by fear, anxiety, or negative beliefs. We can ask ourselves, is this thought based on evidence? Is it realistic? Does it reflect my true worth, or is it rooted in old patterns or fears? This process of questioning and challenging our inner dialogue can help us separate the truth from the lies our minds tell us. Another approach is to reframe our negative self-talk. Instead of accepting harmful beliefs as truth, we can consciously choose to replace them with more positive and realistic perspectives. For example, if the inner voice tells us that we're not capable of succeeding, we can counter that with the truth that we've succeeded in the past, or that we have the skills and resources to learn and grow. Reframing our thoughts takes practice, but it can help us break free from the cycle of self-doubt and negative thinking. Therapy, particularly cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, is another effective way to address a lying inner voice. CBT helps individuals identify and challenge distorted thinking patterns and replace them with healthier, more realistic beliefs. A therapist can help guide us through the process of recognizing when our inner voice is lying to us and provide strategies to shift our thinking in a more positive and accurate direction. It's also important to recognize that our inner voice is not the only source of truth in our lives. We can look to external sources, friends, family, mentors, or even our own experiences to gain a more balanced perspective. Sometimes we need outside validation or feedback to help us see ourselves clearly and break free from the lies our inner voice tells us. The people who care about us often see our strengths and potential more clearly than we do when we're trapped in negative thinking. Additionally, practicing self-compassion is key. The inner voice is often harsh and critical, and it can be difficult to silence it. But by being kind and gentle with ourselves, we can learn to quiet the voice of self-criticism and instead cultivate a more supportive and understanding inner dialogue. Self-compassion involves treating ourselves with the same kindness and care that we would offer a close friend, especially during times of struggle or self-doubt. Ultimately, if your inner voice is lying to you, it's important to remember that it's not the definitive voice of your true self. It's just one part of you, shaped by your experiences, fears, and past influences, and it doesn't define who you are. The truth of who you are is not bound by the lies your mind tells you. By challenging these lies, seeking outside perspectives, and practicing self-compassion, you can find clarity, truth, and a deeper connection to your authentic self. The inner voice may always be there, but it doesn't have to be your guide. You are the one who gets to decide what is true and what is not. What if progress is just a well-dressed loop? What if progress is just a well-dressed loop? This question asks us to reconsider the very concept of progress, the idea that humanity is constantly evolving, improving, and advancing towards something better. It challenges the belief that progress is linear, that we are moving toward an increasingly advanced, enlightened, and perfected state. Instead, it suggests that progress might simply be a cycle, a loop that gives the illusion of forward movement, but in reality repeats itself with only minor variations. Could the advancements we celebrate, the technological innovations, social reforms, and personal growth we so often laud, be part of a bigger cyclical pattern rather than a genuine one-way trajectory toward improvement? At first, this thought may seem bleak or even discouraging. If progress is just a loop, then it could mean that all our efforts, our work, our struggles, our pursuits of happiness and success are ultimately futile. If history repeats itself in an endless cycle, then do we ever really move forward? Do we ever truly evolve or make meaningful advancements? Or are we simply reenacting the same dramas over and over again, wearing different clothes, speaking different words, but ultimately experiencing the same patterns of growth, conflict, and resolution? One way to explore this idea is by looking at history itself. While we often see history as a progression, one era leading to the next, with each generation building upon the last, there are also clear patterns of repetition throughout time. Think of how often societies rise, thrive, and fall, only for similar structures to emerge again. The cycle of empires, wars, revolutions, and reforms seems to repeat across centuries, each time in a different form, yet often with strikingly similar outcomes. Have we really made progress, or are we simply replaying a story that's been told before in a slightly altered version? In the realm of personal development, we might feel like we are always progressing, growing, learning, improving. We strive to be better versions of ourselves, set new goals, and work towards self-actualization. But what if, despite our best efforts, we find ourselves facing the same struggles, repeating the same mistakes, or even finding ourselves back in situations we thought we had outgrown? Are we really moving forward, or are we merely revisiting similar emotional and psychological challenges as if our personal growth is more cyclical than linear? This could also apply to societal progress. We often think of progress in terms of social justice, equality, and human rights, believing that each new generation will build upon the accomplishments of the last, creating a more just and equitable world. Yet, we continue to see the same patterns of injustice, inequality, and division across different cultures and time periods. While we have made significant strides in some areas, like civil rights and gender equality, the fight for equality seems to be an ongoing struggle with victories and setbacks, but no clear end. Is social progress truly forward-moving, or is it a cycle that repeats itself with only small incremental changes? The idea that progress is a well-dressed loop also calls into question our relationship with technology. We often celebrate technological advancements as markers of progress. Each new invention is seen as a step forward in human development. Yet, there are patterns in the way technology evolves. Each new technological leap, while exciting and transformative, often comes with its own set of problems, challenges, and unforeseen consequences. The promise of technological progress often carries with it a sense of repetition. A new invention solves one problem but creates another, and so the cycle continues. For example, the Internet revolutionized communication, but it has also brought about issues of privacy, misinformation, and social disconnection. Each technological advancement feels like a new chapter, but perhaps it's just a reworking of the same old story. Innovations that bring both benefits and challenges, moving us in circles rather than forward. If progress is, in fact, a well-dressed loop, what does that mean for how we approach our lives? It could mean that instead of seeing progress as a linear, goal-oriented path, we need to embrace the cyclical nature of growth and change. Life might not be about reaching a final perfect state. Rather, it might be about learning to navigate the cycles of growth and setback, success and failure, that define our experience. In a loop, we might encounter the same obstacles over and over, but each time we face them, we have the opportunity to approach them from a new perspective, armed with new knowledge and insights. This perspective would require a shift away from the idea that progress is about getting somewhere specific, and instead view life as a process of constant movement, learning, and relearning. Moreover, if progress is cyclical, it might encourage us to focus less on the end goal and more on the journey itself. Rather than obsessing over whether we are getting somewhere, we might start to appreciate the moments of growth and insight that come from the struggles we encounter in the cycle. If we are always moving forward, we might miss the opportunities for deeper understanding that arise when we face familiar patterns and challenges again. The loop becomes not something to escape, but something to explore with curiosity and patience. This cyclical view of progress also challenges the way we measure success. In a linear model of progress, success is often defined by reaching a destination, completing a project, achieving a goal, or reaching a specific level of happiness. But if progress is a loop, success might not be about reaching a final point, but rather about how we engage with the cycle. Perhaps success is found in how we deal with the repetitions of life, how we grow from our experiences, how we make peace with setbacks, and how we learn to adapt and evolve within the loop. This perspective encourages a more compassionate and realistic approach to success, one that acknowledges that life is not about constant forward motion, but about the wisdom we gain from cycling through experiences repeatedly. The idea that progress is a loop could also encourage us to reconsider our expectations. In a world that often values quick fixes and immediate results, we might feel frustrated when progress doesn't seem to happen as fast as we want. But if we accept that progress is cyclical, we might be more patient with ourselves and others, understanding that growth doesn't always happen in a straight line. It's okay to revisit challenges and mistakes, as these repetitions may bring deeper insights or allow for subtle shifts that propel us forward in ways we can't always see in the moment. Ultimately, the thought that progress is just a well-dressed loop offers a more complex and nuanced view of the human experience. It challenges the belief that we are always moving forward towards something better, and instead suggests that growth, change, and improvement are part of a recurring cycle, constantly unfolding with each repetition. By embracing the loop, we can learn to see the value in the cycles of life, the ups and downs, the successes and setbacks, as opportunities for learning and transformation, rather than simply as obstacles or frustrations. What if you were born in the wrong universe? What if you were born in the wrong universe? This is a question that taps into the deep sense of disconnection and existential questioning many people feel at some point in their lives. It suggests the idea that the reality we experience, the universe we inhabit, might not align with who we are or who we were meant to be. What if the world, the laws of physics, the social structures, the cultural norms, all of it feels out of place to you, as if you somehow don't quite belong here? The possibility that we could be born into the wrong universe opens up a space for profound contemplation on identity, purpose, and the very nature of existence. At first glance, the idea of being born in the wrong universe seems like a fantastical notion. After all, we assume that we are living in the only universe there is. Our universe is the one that contains us, our planet, and everything we know to be true. The thought that there could be another parallel universe where things might have unfolded differently, where we might fit more comfortably or have a different life, seems like science fiction. Yet, what if this idea isn't about literal alternate universes, but rather a metaphor for the dissonance between who we feel we are and the world around us? The feeling of being in the wrong universe often comes from a sense of alienation. Many people at some point may feel disconnected from their surroundings, whether it's from societal pressures, cultural expectations, or even personal identity. For example, someone might feel that the society they live in doesn't align with their personal values or desires. The cultural norms, the emphasis on material success, the pressure to conform, these things might feel foreign to them, as if they were born in a world that doesn't quite suit their essence. In this sense, feeling like you were born in the wrong universe can be a way of expressing that your internal experience doesn't match the external reality you are forced to navigate. Consider, for example, the pressure many people feel to succeed according to certain societal standards, wealth, status, career advancement, only to find that these goals don't bring them fulfillment. Maybe their true desires lie in creative pursuits, in helping others, or in finding deeper meaning beyond material success. In these moments of misalignment, it's easy to feel as though the universe we inhabit doesn't reflect who we are or what we value. If the world we live in doesn't match our deepest sense of purpose, the idea that we are in the wrong universe feels almost like a natural conclusion. Alternatively, this question might arise when people experience moments of profound disconnection, such as feelings of depression, anxiety, or existential dread. These emotions can make us feel like we don't belong, as though we're stuck in a world that doesn't make sense, one where the rules of life seem arbitrary or even unfair. If you've ever had moments of questioning the meaning of existence or the point of human life, the idea of being born in the wrong universe might reflect a longing for a reality that feels more just, more meaningful, or more aligned with your sense of self. The concept also brings up the idea of alternate realities and parallel universes, which have been popularized in science fiction and quantum mechanics. The theory of the multiverse suggests that there might be an infinite number of universes, each with different versions of reality, potentially even different versions of ourselves. What if, in some parallel universe, you are living a life that aligns more closely with your true self? Perhaps in that universe, the social structures, the laws of nature, or even your personal circumstances are more in tune with your needs, desires, and identity. This thought experiment can evoke both wonder and frustration. Wonder at the possibility of an alternate universe where everything feels right, and frustration that we can only experience this one imperfect universe. But even if we don't subscribe to the idea of parallel universes or alternate realities, the question of being born in the wrong universe can still offer insight into how we relate to the world. It points to the gap between our internal world and the external one. If you feel as though you don't belong, or that the world around you doesn't fit who you are, it might be helpful to ask yourself, what aspects of this world are in conflict with my true self? What can I change, and what can I accept? This inquiry can guide you toward a deeper understanding of yourself and what you need from the world around you. It might also invite us to think about our own ability to adapt, change, and create our own reality within the one we're given. Even if we feel like we are in the wrong universe, we still have the power to find meaning within it, to carve out a life that reflects who we are. It may not be easy, and it may take time and effort to navigate a world that feels alien. But our agency and our creativity can allow us to reshape our experience. After all, our thoughts, actions, and choices can influence the world we inhabit, even if the universe itself feels indifferent to our desires. In this sense, being born in the wrong universe can be a call to action, a reminder that even if things don't seem right, we have the power to create meaning and carve a space for ourselves in the world we've been given. Moreover, it's important to recognize that these feelings of alienation and disconnection are not uncommon. Many people throughout history have felt like they were out of sync with the world they were born into. Philosophers, artists, writers, and activists often feel as though they are misunderstood or at odds with societal norms, yet they are the very individuals who shape culture, challenge the status quo, and create change. If you feel as though you don't fit into the world around you, it might be because you're in a position to redefine what that world can be. Sometimes those who feel like they're living in the wrong universe are the ones who end up transforming it. This thought experiment also invites us to think about what it means to truly belong. Is belonging about fitting perfectly into the structures and expectations of the world, or is it about finding your own path and creating a life that feels authentic to you? Perhaps the answer is not to look for a universe that aligns perfectly with who we are, but to create spaces, relationships, and experiences that allow us to feel at home in our own skin, even if the larger universe seems indifferent. True belonging may not come from external circumstances, but from how we relate to and navigate the world around us. In conclusion, the idea of being born in the wrong universe can be both a source of existential questioning and a call for personal growth. It challenges us to confront the dissonance we may feel between our inner selves and the external world, and invites us to explore what it means to find meaning, belonging, and purpose in a universe that doesn't always feel like it was designed for us. Even if we don't always feel at home, we have the capacity to create meaning within the world we've been given, and perhaps in doing so, we can reshape our experience to reflect more closely who we truly are. What if consciousness is a glitch? What if consciousness is a glitch? This is a deeply philosophical and unsettling question that invites us to reconsider one of the most fundamental aspects of our existence, the very nature of awareness, self, and thought. We live our lives guided by our conscious experience, and consciousness shapes how we interpret the world around us. It is the lens through which we understand reality, our desires, fears, and relationships. But what if consciousness, the very thing that defines us as human beings, is not a grand design or a beautifully orchestrated aspect of existence, but rather an accident, a glitch in the system, something that shouldn't have happened? The idea that consciousness could be a glitch challenges our deepest assumptions about life and reality. If consciousness is a glitch, it implies that our awareness of the world, the ability to reflect on ourselves, and even our very sense of being, may be something that arose unexpectedly or by mistake. It brings up the question, what if consciousness wasn't an intended feature of life at all, but simply a quirk of evolution or some unintended consequence of complex systems interacting in a way that gave rise to self-awareness? At its core, this idea forces us to confront the notion that consciousness might not be some miraculous gift or divine design, but rather an incidental side effect of the brain's complex functions. Imagine that, for all the sophistication of the human brain, the rise of conscious thought is not a perfected, deliberate outcome, but a byproduct, something that emerged unintentionally as our brains became more complex and intricate. In this sense, consciousness could be seen not as something that was meant to be, but as an evolutionary anomaly, a malfunction of sorts. This idea might seem disconcerting at first because we tend to place so much value on consciousness. We think of it as the thing that makes us uniquely human, the feature that sets us apart from other forms of life. It's what allows us to think, to create, to reason, and to experience the world in a way that seems far beyond instinctual behavior. Our sense of self, our identity, is tied to this consciousness. But what if this inner voice, the thoughts that weave the narrative of who we are, is not the brilliant product of evolution, but rather a random feature, a glitch that happened to emerge along the way? If consciousness is truly a glitch, it raises several profound questions. For one, if we are simply the result of an accidental quirk in the system, does that change how we view the significance of our lives? If consciousness isn't purposeful, then what is the meaning of our awareness? Are we simply wandering through existence, aware of our own being but without any greater meaning or direction? This could be a deeply nihilistic perspective, suggesting that if our consciousness is not the product of some higher design, then perhaps it doesn't have any inherent meaning. Our thoughts, emotions, and experiences could simply be the result of random processes, with no greater purpose beyond the functioning of our brains. However, there is another way to view the idea of consciousness as a glitch, one that challenges the traditional, deterministic view of reality. If consciousness is truly a glitch, it might be the one feature that breaks the rules, a subversion of the normal workings of the universe. A glitch implies a break from the expected, a disruption of an otherwise smooth-running system. In this sense, perhaps consciousness is the anomaly that gives us the power to break free from determinism, to think independently, to reflect on our existence, and to create meaning where none may have naturally existed. If consciousness is a glitch, we might find freedom in that very imperfection. It could be that the glitch is what allows us to transcend instinct, to question, to imagine, and to strive for something beyond survival or reproduction. Consciousness, in this view, would be the spark that makes us aware of our own limitations, but also gives us the potential to rise above them. It might be a glitch, but it's the glitch that allows for creativity, for self-reflection, for philosophy, and for art. If the universe is a complex machine, Consciousness might be the little fault in the system that enables us to see it differently, to step outside of it, and to change how we interact with it. From a different perspective, if consciousness is a glitch, it may also be a reminder of how much we don't understand about life and the universe. It suggests that there is still much to be discovered about the nature of the mind, the brain, and the fundamental principles of reality. In this view, consciousness may not be an accident in the negative sense, but rather a feature we have yet to fully comprehend. It could be a doorway to deeper truths about existence, one that we haven't unlocked yet. Perhaps in the grand scheme of things, our consciousness is just a tiny fragment of a larger mystery that we are yet to understand, a glitch in a much larger, more intricate system. The idea that consciousness is a glitch also forces us to reflect on how we view the nature of reality itself. If consciousness is merely a random outcome, then what does that say about the world we inhabit? Is the universe itself a vast, intricate system of cause and effect, where each action, each event, is a result of prior forces with no inherent meaning or direction? Or is there something more, something that goes beyond the mechanical, something that consciousness allows us to grasp, even if we can't fully understand it? In this context, consciousness as a glitch could be both humbling and empowering. It's an imperfection that allows us to experience the world in a unique way, yet it also reveals the limitations of human knowledge and understanding. If we accept the idea that consciousness might be a glitch, we are also confronted with a challenge. How do we live knowing that our awareness may not have a deeper purpose or design? How do we create meaning and navigate life in a world that might not be as purposeful as we imagine? This is a question that forces us to confront the uncertainty and impermanence of existence, and it invites us to find our own meaning in the face of an imperfect universe. Perhaps the answer lies in the very imperfection of consciousness itself. If we accept that our awareness is a glitch, we might embrace the possibility that meaning is not something inherent in the universe, but something we create. The glitch in the system allows us the freedom to build our own narratives, to find meaning in the connections we make, the experiences we have, and the ways we choose to act. In a world where consciousness might be an accident, it becomes our responsibility to make the most of it, to create meaning where none exists, and to live fully in the face of uncertainty. In conclusion, the idea that consciousness is a glitch invites us to reconsider the very nature of our awareness and existence. It challenges the assumption that consciousness is a purposeful or divine feature and instead presents it as a random event, an anomaly in the system. Whether we view this as a tragedy or a triumph depends on how we choose to respond to it. If consciousness is a glitch, it gives us the opportunity to reshape our understanding of reality, to embrace the imperfection of existence, and to find meaning in the randomness of life. The glitch, after all, is what allows us to see the world differently, to reflect, to grow, and to create our own purpose in a universe that might not have one waiting for us.